talk about anything else.
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated, yes.
To our favorite shows.
Oh, my circuit!
Everybody loves Hippo Toad.
Scary Dog!
Pearson at Blurnsville.
Futurama!
Hey, Jesse.
Yeah.
Ed Brubaker wrote a show that's on Amazon Prime. Want to do a podcast on it?
Yeah. What's it called?
Too Old to Die Young.
Didn't he write Gotham Central?
Yes.
And the Fade Out?
Yes.
Okay. Sure. But who's this Reffin guy?
End scene. That was brilliant.
Oh, that was excruciating is what that was. Excruciating.
For those of you that are still with us, welcome to TV Party Tonight. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Rattledge. And you might have just heard the dulcet tones of one Jesse Starcher, Mr. Essential himself. How you doing, Jesse?
Oh, my gosh. I cannot believe I have not been essential enough to actually sit down and suffer through what we're going to talk about tonight. I should have said, no, wait a second, I can't do it. I am totally too essential to sit and watch dramatic pauses.
Standing around. What was it you called it in our chat?
Oh,
Standing
wait.
around doing
No,
nothing.
here.
The series.
I've got 3 titles for this show before we
Okay.
actually get to the right one. It is one was Stand Around the Show, No Emote the Series, and Breaking Bad, but 75% slower.
So the subject in question we were talking about is the Amazon Prime miniseries written by Ed Brubaker and Nicholas Winding Refn called Too Old to Die Young. And I pitched this to Jesse because this was when I made the schedule back in 1965. There wasn't going to be anything to talk about this particular week. There were no movies. At the time, nothing. There were no television shows to talk about that would line up for this open week. And I thought, we haven't done, as I mentioned last night on the Scene of the Crime podcast with Christiane, we haven't done an author focus in a while. We did one for Alan Moore. We've done a couple of different ones hither and thither in the past. And I thought, okay, let's focus on Ed Brubaker. I like the Fade Out. His work with Captain America and the Winter Soldier apparently was phenomenal. Ed Brubaker, comes highly recommended and has won many awards. A lot of them we went over last night on Source Material Live. So I'm like, let's dedicate an entire week to Ed Brubaker. We'll do Scene of the Crime. We'll do the show that he wrote on Amazon. And then, who directed it? This Refn fella who I've never heard of. Apparently, he's an award-winning director, too. He's won for Drive and some other stuff. And, okay, this will be a fun thing to do. It's a little off the beaten path. Let me first go ahead and say, I'm sorry, Jesse. I didn't know. I didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. But secondly, once I did know, and I saw this sort of direction style of Refn, and I started to read about him and what he's all about, because like Ed Brubaker is one thing, but this Too Old to Die Young definitely becomes a Refn vehicle, and he has his own, and we're going to talk about that even before we get into the show, his own very particular style of direction. His movies have a particular look to them. The direction has a very particular style, and you either love it or you're the rest of the world and you hate it. Either way, it is definitely worth having a conversation about. And so I pitched it to my other guest on the show tonight, ladies and gentlemen, the coverage god of 411 Mania and the host of Damn You Hollywood in his own right, Mr. Robert Winfrey. Man, you say I'm in the hunt for things that reward you for paying attention and things that make you think, and I thought this should be both of those things. So welcome to the show, Robert Winfrey.
Should have been both. Turned out to be neither.
So I apparently owe you an apology as well. This is. Let us never speak of the shortcut again.
I mean, I'll take it if you're going to give me one.
So anyway, I want to.
Man, it's a little bit like I'm not even in control of my own life, you know? Rattling, dictating everything I do, like you got no say. I think I'm going to have to kill him.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first, and the line forms to the left. I've got a couple of different notes here that I think we need to provide some context for what the show is and what it's supposed to look like and how it's supposed to read and all of that. But let me ask you just a very general question, because in our private chats you've talked about how you're at least somewhat familiar with Refn. So how did you come to Refn, and what have you thought of his other work?
I came to Refn, I think the first thing of his that I saw was actually the Tom Hardy vehicle, Bronson, which was one of his, it's not his first feature film, but one of the first that actually started getting him some traction. I saw a lot of buzz about it. I found it online. I like Tom Hardy. I was willing to take a flyer on that. And it's not nearly as inaccessible as this. To be abundantly clear, that's like reading, Dostoevsky is a little bit more accessible than this at times. Much as I enjoy Dostoevsky, let's not pretend that he doesn't write some dense material. So I watched Bronson, which, again, I enjoyed. Love Tom Hardy's performance. Some of the art house effects are kept to a little bit more of a minimum. I saw Drive, because the number of critics that spontaneously climaxed at various points throughout that movie and then decided they had to share their unique experiences with the world. Thanks, guys. To be clear, I don't have anything against Drive. It didn't speak to me the way it spoke to other people, but that's not a knock on the movie. Then on Netflix, I came across another movie of his. This one actually predates Drive. It's called Valhalla Rising, and it stars Mads Mikkelsen. And I very much enjoyed that. So again, everybody treats their body like an amusement park over Drive. I actually prefer both Bronson and Valhalla Rising for a variety of reasons. So I'm not unfamiliar with the man's work. I haven't made some kind of deep academic study of it, like I'm sure some wank pheasants are doing right now, because they have nothing better to do with themselves. But I'm familiar enough with it to understand bits and pieces of his style. I like surrealism as kind of a general rule. It has to be done properly, but that's usually a caveat for just about anything. So I'm not turned off by the sight of his name being attached to something, the way Jesse will now be forevermore.
Yes, indeed. Unique.
Yeah. So, Refn is influenced in part by the French New Wave of cinema. And it's important to understand what that is and what it looks like so that the show makes some degree of sense. The French New Wave, or the New Wave, of the French art film movement, which emerged in the late 1950s, the movement was characterized by its rejection of traditional filmmaking conventions in favor of experimentation and a spirit of iconoclasm. New Wave filmmakers explored new approaches to editing, visual style, and narrative, as well as engagement with the social and political upheavals of the era, often making use of irony or exploring existential themes. The New Wave is often considered one of the most influential movements in the history of cinema. And I don't want to get too much more into that. You got anything you want to add to what French New Wave is, or what it could be, or what it tends to look like, Robert?
No, that if you read the cold academic description of it, whatever image you conjure in your head of how this manifests on film is probably about accurate. The only thing that I think the best thing that kind of came out of the new wave of French cinema, as far as that goes, is actually French horror films.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few of which are genuinely gut churning, and they seem to exist as a not a full rejection of that. I mean, if you look at stuff like Them, I mean the big ones like Them, Martyrs, and I'm completely blanking on the name of this last one, and it's annoying me because it deals with it's again like one of the most disturbing of them all. And if you've seen Martyrs, that's saying something. I can't remember the title. It deals with I'll say it deals with a pregnant woman, and leave the rest to your imagination.
Ooh.
They are deliberately hard. I mean, Them actually features no violence, but it's still very disturbing. And then I don't want to get too deep into it, but they're almost pseudo rejections of elements of the new wave, in that they tend to adhere a bit more towards slightly traditional narrative structures. They put their own twists on it. What they take from it is more just like editing tricks and kind of narrative boldness, in the sense that, okay, we're gonna tell this story, and it's gonna get inside, and it's gonna grip at parts of you weren't even aware were there, and it's going to twist them.
I myself have watched a little bit of French New Wave film, not a lot. Not a lot, even that I could, and so long ago that I can't remember it. But I will tell you, and I had to relook it up again because I knew I had seen something that was sort of an evolution of French New Wave into what's called the New French Extremity movement. Have you ever seen Irreversible with Monica Bellucci?
I have.
So have I.
I can imagine why you watched it.
Yeah, that is exactly why I watched it.
There's some boobies in this, I guess. No.
The film was particularly controversial upon its release for its graphic portrayal of violence, specifically the scene where a man is savagely bludgeoned to death with a fire extinguisher, and its 10-minute-long take rape of Monica Bellucci, who was then brutally beaten into a coma.
Jeez.
Yeah, I remember that very well. This competed for the Palme d'Or in 2002.
Irreversible is I hate to say I like it, because that seems like such a weird thing to say about that movie. There's things about it that I mean, they tell the story backwards, which is a really interesting trick, especially because not the opening segment, but the one that immediately follows it is a couple of guys beating someone to death with a fire extinguisher. Ostensibly, this is the person who, again, raped and put Monica Bellucci into a coma and wound up killing the unborn child she was carrying. And the interesting thing about that is we are not given that context. We see them go, "Hey, we found him," and they beat this man to death. Right. Of course, if you have the stomach for watching the movie a second time, you'll realize the man they beat to death is not actually the man that's responsible. He's actually in that same bar watching this happening, and Vincent Cassel is such a glorious bag of shit.
So, that's why when Jesse and I were talking about this is how I'll transition here. So Jesse was like, I don't know what to make of this. Like, what do you... Jesse and I were going back and forth. Like, we were like live tweeting between each other, this movie. And I said, it's like somebody took a gritty crime noir, like, Breaking Bad or The Wire or something like that. Not L.A. Story, but it's the one I'm thinking of.
L.A. Noire?
L.A. Noire.
Or Confidential.
Yeah, L.A. Confidential. And somebody took like L.A. Confidential, and it had dirty hobo sex with French New Wave film in a neon lit disco bathroom, and this was its love child.
While David Lynch is the director of photography for the video that will be released on demand.
No, David Lynch is just in the corner nodding approvingly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is very much like Lost Highway, but neon lit. Which, by the way, Jesse, if you want to know, if you ever want to go through this experience again, watch Lost Highway.
Okay, thank you. Putting it on the short list of movies I'll never watch.
Yeah, watch that. Yeah, if someone ever says to you, watch Lost Highway, punch them in the chin. You've seen Lost Highway, right, Robert?
No, actually.
Okay, I've never seen a least sexy doggy-style sex scene in my life, and I've seen a lot of nonchalant doggy style.
Hold on. I absolutely have a less interesting one for that. It's from. No offense to the actors in play, because it's supposed to be that way, but there's a scene from Peaky Blinders where Sam Neill, and I forget the actress who is his scene partner for that, but she's actually she's like the madam for the prostitutes. Mm-hmm. And she's doing the kind of moaning thing, and he says, "Stop faking it, I don't care." So she stops, and he keeps going.
Nice.
Look, Sam Neill with an Irish accent is just the best.
Yeah. So yeah, Jesse, I don't know if you knew that about me, but I used to be a real big film person. Which is what, like the irony of "Damn You Hollywood" is this me rejecting all of that, going, I just want to see explosions.
More of the boom boom, please.
Yes, please. Anyway, so now I hope, in a very joking, sort of colloquial way, people understand that Too Old to Die Young comes from that tradition with the sort of marquee neon-lit style that I think Refn is known for. Sort of back me up on that, Robert. Like, the neon thing seems to be like his color palette, like his motif.
That's a bit more of a mock. That started more with Drive.
Okay.
Valhalla Rising is actually set like during the Viking attempt to like some of their. It's not straight Vikings. It's been a while since I've seen it. It is that kind of era of I want to say Vikings who come and stumble across North America. Mm-hmm. So no, there's not a lot of neon, but he does play around with a lot of color. In fact, the main character, shouldn't say the main character, Mads Mikkelsen's character. Part of his gimmick is that he can see the future. Mm-hmm. And whenever he gets a flash of what's going to happen in the future, it's drenched in red. So he plays around with color, but the neon thing is actually somewhat limited to setting appropriate stuff. I mean, part of the reason Drive is drenched in neon is in fact because of the setting. There's not a lot of neon when they're in the deserts of Mexico here, but anytime they're in Los Angeles, sure, here, have neon because LA.
Yeah. And that's been a lot of critics have talked about that, where he seems to be in love with LA Night, especially like driving around.
Hang on, who doesn't love Eli Drake?
Boo.
Look, I know it's passé to kind of mock wrestler names when they debut in WWE, but LA Knight sounds like either a bad Batman spinoff from the '90s or a failed line of Nike sneakers from the 90s.
Point being, like, people have talked about like the idea of like driving around like Sunset Boulevard and like right in the middle of seedy Los Angeles. Like, if you've ever actually been there, and I have, and I've been there at night, it's like being on Broadway in New York, only not nearly as classy. It's gross.
Considering what Broadway in New York has been at various points, that is a low gutter to
post Disney. It's like nice now, but yeah, if you were talking back in like the Deuce era, sure, it was seedy and horrible.
When you grew up around that area, Mark,
I wasn't going into the city as a child, though.
I'm just saying, when you were a wee lad growing up in Uniondale,
Yeah.
back when it was the hood, even the people in your hood went, yeah, brought downtown Times Square, man.
Yeah, that's where you
Not
got hookers and drugs. And then Disney took over, and the hookers and drugs went to Brooklyn. So
Hipsters took over and they moved to the Bronx.
yep.
One of the things I saw real quick, just
Yeah.
as you guys are talking about the way his films look, it's mentioned in the wiki that he's colorblind, and that has influenced his style in regards to what comes across on the screen, because he says he has to be able to see it. So that's why a lot of what you see has brilliant contrast as well. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
It is.
To my personal taste, I'm a lot less married to kind of, how do I say this without sounding like a complete lunatic? Traditional color theory structure, I suppose.
Yeah.
I really don't mind at all if a film decides to play around with that, or if we get into the stuff that's more, fully animated, be that CG, hand drawn, whatever. They play around with color all the time. In fact, one of my favorite series deliberately radically changes color schemes from scene to scene depending on what the author feels the mood is, because part of his personal theory about color is that it's not really set in stone. It's very, very malleable to the point where the sky doesn't have to be blue.
So, Too Old to Die Young, right? We've talked about the direction, style, where it's emanating out of, and who is doing it. We've talked about Refn. We've talked about his influence of the French New Wave. We've talked about the color paletting and the look of the show. So what is it exactly? So Too Old to Die Young follows a grieving police officer who, along with the man who shot his partner...
No.
Fine.
That is deeply inaccurate. Miles Teller is not grieving in this movie. He's not anything.
Okay. I'm just reading the premise on the Wikipedia. Please just
Are you
bear with
sure
me.
it doesn't say like a piece of wood in a police uniform?
This 200-pound cement sculpture resembling Miles.
Too Old to Die Young follows a cyborg who, along with the man who shot his partner, finds himself in an underworld filled with working-class hitmen, Yakuza soldiers, cartel assassins sent from Mexico, Russian mafia captains, and gangs of teenage killers. And really what it is, and we're going to go through these episode by episode because there's no other way to talk about this.
That is not for the record, that's loosely accurate, but that will not at all give you a sense of this show if you just looked at that and went, oh, this sounds like a thing. No.
So...
superficial resemblance to that series of words at best.
So the show kind of has two different angles. There's the Miles Teller storyline where he's a cop and he gets he's involved with criminals, and he along the way decides that he wants to kill the worst of the worst, specifically pedophiles, and he begins to do that. Then there's this Mexican crime family and the passing of the crime boss to his son, who wants to reclaim their territory. And within that, there is a vigilante killing cartel members, and it's shown early on who that vigilante is and what she does and how she does it.
Why
and
is there just no payoff to that whole subplot?
And it sort of follows through for the rest of the series, kind of, sort of. All right, so... let's get into this. These episodes are varying in length. Some are, I think it starts out like 100 and then an hour and a half, and like the final episode's like 30 minutes, and the rest are in between.
Yeah, there's a couple that are 90 minutes, a few that are an hour and 20 minutes, a few that are just an hour, and then, like you said, the last one is only 30 minutes, which is divided up. I'll just say this about the last episode. It's divided up into 3 different 10-minute segments that basically go as follows. Female character masturbates. Female character dances around the house and then speaks near gibberish that's supposed to be profound. Cut to cartel vigilante who listens to a fan song sung about her to feed her ego, then commits murder.
All right. So I'm going to read this plot synopsis here. These are very short. And then I'm going to go to you, Jesse, to give me your thoughts and reactions.
I have notes.
Yes.
And I think what I'm doing is I'm just doing, like, top 3, what the fuck, what, why, where, and how. Okay. But let's just preface this real quick. Obviously, if you're a Reffin fan and you haven't turned off this podcast, you might want to go ahead and turn it off because it is downhill from here for the review.
For the record, that is Jesse's perspective only. It is mostly Mark's. It is partially mine. We are not going to trash this thing wholesale simply because we can. I promise you. We have specific critiques, not just we don't know what was going on. Why isn't there why isn't there more action? That is not the angle any of us are taking when we critique this.
Yeah, no, I am not on this podcast to totally bash this show. That's Jesse.
I'm the nice guy here telling people, here's your out. Okay?
That's fair. That's fair.
Jesse is the town crier at this point, going, run, save yourself. No, if anyone has ever listened to any TV party that we've done who's listening to this now, we are fair. We call bullshit when we see it, but we are fair, and things that we call out the things that should be called out. We praise the things that we should, and there are things about the show to praise, and there are things that are befuddling, to say the least. Volume 1, The Devil, written by Reffin and Brubaker.
All of these are written by Reffin and Brubaker.
Los Angeles police officer Larry is shot dead while taking a selfie for his mistress Amanda, like you do. His partner Martin Jones, who is Miles Teller, hides the picture from the police and instead shows it to gang leader Damien, who identifies the killer as Jesus Rojas, whose mother Martin killed. In exchange for their silence, they pressure Martin into killing a man for them. Martin has dinner with his with the rich father of his 17-year-old, who is played by Billy Baldwin, in probably the best role he's ever had.
I guarantee this is not any acting from Billy Baldwin. They brought him on set and this is Billy Baldwin in his natural habitat.
I disagree. I think they gave him coke, and then they just they just spun him around and directed him into a scene.
Threw him some stuffed animals and said, "Here you go, sir."
Yeah.
They showed him some of Charlie Sheen's meltdowns while he was high. So we have high William Baldwin watching high melting down Charlie Sheen and said, something adjacent to this.
What's my motivation? Here's cocaine. Here's a stuffed tiger. You figure out what to do. Yep. And they just filmed it like a wild animal. Anyway. Rich father of a 17-year-old girlfriend, played by Billy Baldwin. Janie, who seems to...
wait. Okay, just for the record, because of the way Mark phrased that, Billy Baldwin does not play his 17-year-old girlfriend.
Sorry. Correct. Janie, who seems to approve of the relationship. In private, though, he acts bizarrely with Martin, imitating a tiger, rawr, and making sexual advances towards him. After more coercion from Damien, Martin decides to do what he's asked. He tracks his target down to a car shop after a fight with the man who is naked. Why are you naked? Why aren't you? Martin kills him. At Larry's memorial service, where police serve orange juice and pancakes, Martin is promoted to the homicide division. Damien's gang captures Amanda, claiming she tried to sell Martin out to the Mexicans. They offer him a gun and the opportunity to deal with her as he wants. We are not shown what he does, aside from accepting the gun. Outside, he messages Janie. Okay, Jesse, you've been, patiently waiting while, me and Robert jerk each other off over the French New Wave. Now's your time, buddy.
Oh, goodness. Okay, so, yeah, as if people couldn't tell, I'm your average run-of-the-mill TV show, film, and I enjoy those things. Okay, a good TV show, great. I'm excited about it. Now, the first thing that I notice is, and I will absolutely praise the cinematography in this show. It's probably some of the finest I've seen for a television show. Seriously, when it comes to the pacing, it is immediately understood that it's at the first point where it was Miles and his partner who had that lady pulled over, and things were kind of moving slow. I was like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that was what the whole series was going to be, because they would have conversation and stop and then continue the conversation, then stop, just like the intro to this show. That is the dialogue. And it wore on me immediately. All right, that's fine. Okay, look, let's push through it. This is episode 1. And then William Baldwin hits the screen with the damn tiger. And he starts to growl. And it's not like, just a couple seconds. It goes on for a horrific amount of time that made me so uneasy. And the purpose of art is to make you feel something. I felt something. I felt something. I was just on pins and needles listening to him have this conversation with Martin, who we find out Martin has been dating a fully grown man.
He's
dating
30.
Yeah, cop. And he's been dating a 16-year-old, and right now
she's 17. He started dating her when she was 16.
exactly. She started, she's 17 right now, and you're expecting like this real sense of. She says, "Well, I'm going to take you over, and I want you to come over and meet my dad. I've told him about us," and I was like, "Oh man, this is going to be awkward." Well, I didn't expect it to get awkward. That is one thing that you can say about this series is your expectations of what is going to happen are really, I think, amped up to 11. What you thought was going to happen, yeah, there was an awkward situation, but did it get just that much more awkward. When he wakes up, they go and sit down in Janie's room, and he grabs the tiger and starts growling. So a lot of perversion in these characters. You can get that right out of the first episode. I think that's really my main thing, because I know we're doing this episode by episode, so I'm just going to pick my top disturbing what the fuck moment is going to be William Baldwin and the tiger.
I don't mind a lengthy nuanced discussion of stoicism and ambiguous morality, which is a lot of what this is. I'm not entirely sure gritty crime noir is the structure that really supports it, though. I mean, I suppose you can, and you can. I think maybe a different director takes a different tact with this, but I think that's where after watching the first episode, and I made the mistake of watching this after podcasting late at night, thinking, okay, gritty crime noir.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I'm going to get that first episode in before I go to bed. And I'm like, I wake up the next morning and start the first episode, and I'm like, bullshit, he made it through that. There's no way.
I got about an hour. I lasted about an hour of that, and I'm like, I have to go to bed. This is like Gone with the fucking Wind. But, just to get on that point, like, it didn't try my patience until about the second half, and it's only because like I just needed to get through it. And if you have one character, like I don't, like we were joking, like Miles Teller plays like a block of wood in this. Like, again, I don't mind a thoughtful reflection of the nature of stoicism embodied in one character. The problem is half of the cast in this thing speaks in a stoic monotone, and they're interacting with normal humans. Like, in such a weird contrast. Like, we'll eventually talk about, like, his interactions in the police station, where there were a lot of reviews that, like, oh, this is a commentary on how much, he doesn't like the police, and he thinks the police are a fascist regime and all of that. And I'm like, at least the police seem like normal human beings.
Remind me to bring that up when we get more into some of his, because I think it's episode 3 where he gets there. I have a slightly different take on that. I might be way out of left field, but I have something else for that.
But the thing with it is, like, if you've watched enough cop dramas and enough cop shows, you know that there's a lot of gallows humor and a lot of cynicism, and so like I'm watching them all interact.
Oh,
and I'm like,
really?
like that all seemed normal to me, and then you have Miles Teller in there, and I said when it's only him doing it, surrounded by people acting like normal humans, speaking in a normal cadence. Like I actually kind of enjoy the interplay and the interaction. He seems very stranger in a strange land. When Janie also talks like a robot, the Mexicans talk like the Mexicans talk like robots. Damien talks like a robot. Like what the fuck, man? Yeah. Am I watching Too Old to Die Young or Metropolis?
I'd rather watch Metropolis.
There were like 3 people who got that joke and like snorted milk out of their nose. Go ahead, Winfrey. Your thoughts on episode 1?
The 3 to 5 second pause between every line of dialogue. God, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. If you were going for the pregnant pause, I don't know what happened to this poor woman or how many children she's carrying, but boy howdy. There's some serious pregnancy going on here as far as the pauses go. I'm with you in that it just, if everyone's doing it, it almost doesn't work unless, and I'm going to stretch this point a little bit. It's done so deliberately and so consistently. I feel like there has to be some other, especially when it's juxtaposed where other places again speak normally.
Yeah.
I almost wonder
an artistic reason behind it or something.
I feel like it's meant to. This is not the only. This is certainly not the only, like, again, kind of surrealistic new wave film that employs this tactic either. So I do wonder if there's not some kind of very deliberate cadence there that is designed to kind of, I mean, hypnotize is the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Like, just kind of lull the viewer into a slightly more suggestible state.
I was lulled.
Look, I'm not saying that, I'm not endorsing it necessarily. I'm saying that might be part of the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, this is one that really does. Like, I've never wanted to bring an artist on this podcast to talk about their projects. I just don't. We're here to comment on it and then move on. And so whatever it was they intended to do with it, that's their thing. And they have, and being a famous person, they have the medium to put their ideas and what they were trying to do out there ad nauseum. They don't need my shitty podcast. This is the only time I would want to bring Refn on and be like, what are you saying about the nature of man here? What are you trying to get across? What is it that you're talking about when you have characters so obviously not talking like normal human beings all the time through how many is this? 10 episodes at 90 minutes a clip constantly. Like, what are you trying to say about anything? About film? About the noir? About life? I don't I want to sit him down on a couch and be like, tell me your thoughts, man. Because I don't get it.
So I started seriously, I got through 1 minute and 30 seconds of it, but there is a documentary called NWR, full documentary, and it's on YouTube, okay? Mm-hmm. And it starts out, and I believe it is a Spanish filmmaker who's talking. I could be wrong, but he's obviously singing the praises of how NWR brought him out of the film depression that he was in, because the American cinema was drunk to the core, and he also mentioned that Spielberg was an idiot. Okay?
Spielberg, a little maudlin.
A minute and a half into that documentary, and I was like, I can't get into this before this podcast as much as I would love to. Turn it right off.
All right. Robert, I kind of cut into what you were saying. Was there anything else you want to talk about before we move on to Volume 2?
Okay, this is gonna... I don't want to dovetail too much here, but there's a thing about the relationship between Martin and Janie that really annoys me.
Not the
And-
pedophilia.
Oh.
Okay. Fine, let's have this conversation. Martin's not a pedophile.
Right. I mean,
Mark,
he's
you-
committing statutory rape, but sure,
Hold
not
on.
not a pedophile.
Now, because we have to legally define childhood and adulthood, the phrase pedophile now applies to anyone under the age of 18 from a purely legal perspective, because that's how we have to differentiate it in the legal system. There's a world of difference from a psychological or a developmental standpoint between a pedophile and a hebephile. A pedophile is someone attracted to children. Mark, I think this should be a non-controversial statement. A 6-year-old is not the same as a 16-year-old.
That is correct.
Now, again, this is not to in any remote sense justify it. It's still morally, first of all, it is legally, the law is very clear here in the United States, at least. Other parts of the world I can't speak to. The morality of it is icky to dubious at best, and the ethics are even more gray. But a hebephile is someone who is attracted to post-pubescent people, usually in line with your sexual orientation, but manifestly not attracted to children. Pedophiles are attracted to children. Again, and we use pedophile as a catch-all term legally, but it is not an accurate one if we're discussing someone's psychology or their psychopathology or any of that type of stuff. Just in the interest of intellectual honesty and full disclosure there, not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
New wave stuff like, not just new wave French, experimental art house stuff like this, anytime a artist can get away with it or they feel it necessary to their story, they will throw something like this into the story. It's not uncommon. And here's my big gripe with it. And I bring it up here because this show plays into this trope, and it has begun to gall me for reasons that I'm still not entirely sure I can articulate. I will try. Janie is portrayed in some respects as the adult in their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I seriously wonder the degree to which anyone writing one of these types of stories has just some profoundly internalized pedosexual orientation of some variety. Because, well, no, she's mature. She's an adult. She's not like the other 16-year-olds. She can handle this. She can handle a sexual relationship with a 30-year-old man. Nah, bullshit. And I hate that. And I hate this trope. I hate that everyone does it. Again, it feels like they are somehow loosely trying to justify their own loosely related issues on that area in that sense by having her not be a child. But oh no, I mean, look, what if freaking pedophiles say? No, they were mature for their age. They're not like the others. No, yeah, congratulations, filmmakers. You sound like the people you're supposed to be demonizing. Good job. Not the. I mean, look, California's not all that far away from just legalizing all that shit anyway.
Okay.
So that's my. And look again. That galls me because everyone does it, and the only reason to do so is to try and make yourself feel better about writing it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's vaguely pathetic. If you want to tell that story about something like this, I hate to accuse Griffin of not having balls, because, good Lord, look at this show.
Yes.
This is not something that gets made if you are artistically, intellectually, weak. That's not what I mean. But he does kind of stumble around this point in particular in line with how pretty much everyone who tries their hand at one of these stumbles. And it annoys me to death for largely that reason.
Okay.
For whatever that's worth.
Volume 2, The Lovers. Jesus escapes to Mexico to wait it out while things calm down in Los Angeles. His uncle, the terminally ill Don Ricardo, highly revered Rojas's mother, who he sees in her son. He also sees in his nurse Yaritza, whom he says he found out in the desert. A mysterious vigilante is killing cartel members, making matters tense with the police. Don Ricardo is also worried about whether his son Miguel is suited to take over. When Don Ricardo dies, Miguel beats up Jesus out of jealousy. He later severely abuses a prostitute, like you do, before making Yuritsa drive her off to be sold. At the exchange, Yuritsa instead kills everyone and frees the girl, revealing herself as the vigilante. Jesus and Miguel later make peace, with Jesus helping him to execute several policemen. When he is about to kill the local chief, the scene cuts out, similarly to with Martin and Amanda. Let me just say, before Jesse gives his thoughts on Volume 2, I thought the actor playing Don Ricardo literally died during his scene. I thought, like, he had more to do, and he just died, and they were like, just keep filming, it's fine. We'll work around it.
If there was ever going to be a show that just took an on-screen death and went, you know what, let's just run with it.
You know, I was watching a guy review this earlier today, and one of the things that he mentioned was that he found himself thinking of things about the show, and then it actually being addressed by the show, and that happens with the Don in this episode, where we're thinking that he's dying or falling asleep in between lines, and then at the table, sitting there eating dinner, that is said by somebody. They say, "Oh, he fell asleep," and I was like, "That's exactly what I was thinking." Of course, with the way these lines or this dialogue is paced, you can't tell, but that happened definitely to me.
Miguel takes that full 5 seconds before he decides to get uppity with Jesus after right after his father has died.
Yeah.
Hey, what's that look? What are you looking at? And there's still the pause in between his lines.
It's ridiculous. Go ahead, Mark. Finish up there. I've got my couple notes for this.
Oh no, that's it. That's all this episode has to offer.
She does reveal herself by name to be the High Priestess of Death, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You pretty much get that she's the vigilante that they were talking about, and she's not someone to mess with. That's for sure. Look, I'll tell you, episode 2 is probably the most normal of the series. I mean, I found myself not picking out too many
things.
On.
Episode 10 is something that should be on every major network television.
Yeah, I don't understand why ABC hasn't called them yet and said, give us more of this.
We're not going to do Stumptown. We can't get that shit together. We're going to get more Too Old to Die Young, please.
Jenna Malone, please. VR headset.
I just need Jenna Malone in a spinoff where she dances around a house constantly.
Oh.
But we'll get there. Go ahead.
Well, one of my main notes was that, this was the first time that the score stood out to me of this series, which I think was great. I compared it to a Stranger Things type vibe. You can make
it is very synthesizer heavy.
Yes.
I was going to say, it is the sound of a cat walking across a synthesizer.
I enjoyed it. I really did like
it.
I liked it. But I specifically put in there, it feels like it belongs in an 80s sci-fi flick, in my opinion. But,
it's so funny you mentioned that, and I'm going to just go ahead and say right now, shut up, Winfrey. I was having Flash Gordon moments.
Okay.
Oh, God.
Wah, 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 wah. Totally, right?
Like it. I like it. Apparently I buried another title for the series in these notes, and I put artfully sitting on couches. That's it.
A lot of that. There's a lot of that.
And I just wrote down, how do you convince someone to watch 13 hours of this? I am at episode 2, and I'm asking myself that question. Okay?
Turns out the answer is threaten them with a podcast.
Yep.
Hey, we're going to do another Metal Hammer of Doom. No, asshole. You're going to watch French New Wave-inspired television.
Oh,
how about that?
It's like, thump. What was that sound? I just killed myself.
Go ahead, Robert.
I get where you're coming from when that this one might seem to be the most normal. It's the least esoteric. You have Yuritsa being a little bit spooky / magical, but the bulk of the story for this particular episode is the cartel wars in Mexico. That's I don't want to say completely standard thing, but it's it's not all that outside the cinematic norms or even television norms, depending on which station you're watching.
I was gonna say, like, if you ran this through the Jesse, when you do your editing and you pull out the silence, what is that called again?
Truncate silence.
Yeah, if you ran this episode through truncate silence and used some more dynamic editing, it's an episode of Narcos.
Yeah.
Pretty close, yeah.
Anything else, Robert, before we move on? Because I don't have a whole lot to say about episode 2, other than I honestly thought Don Ricardo died.
Well, I mean, you start to get the weirdness of that whole family starts to become apparent with the guy's obsession with his sister, and that dovetails, of course, into everyone's favorite other sexual deviation, incest.
So I referenced that last night on Scene of the Crime. I said Scene of the Crime has a very Chinatown feel, and of course Christiane's never seen the talkies before. So...
Well, Chinatown does, in fact, one of its central plot points is around a father raping his daughter, Faye Dunaway.
It is Faye Dunaway. Okay, I couldn't remember if that was her or not. I said Faye Dunaway.
I'm almost positive.
So yeah, I did the Evelyn. She's your daughter. She's your sister thing.
While Jack Nicholson smacks her around, it's a great scene.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's one of the more that and the very end. Forget it, Jack. It's Chinatown. I had to reference both. All right, let's move on. Volume 3, The Hermit. Diana DeYoung, played by Jenna Malone, as Billy Baldwin would say, is a victim's advocate who moonlights as a healer and appears to have magical powers. She has Viggo Larson, a one-eyed former FBI agent who is terminally ill, murder pedophiles like you do. She learns about through her work. One of them,
extrajudicial killings are always such a good thing.
One of the murders goes wrong, and the body is found in a car in a parking lot. Martin, who has just started working homicide, is put on the case. He seems at unease with his middle-aged colleagues who pull practical jokes on each other and openly celebrate fascism.
I have a minor question about this because so many of these run together. I watched this in like 3 sittings.
Mm-hmm.
Did they have the big moment at the whiteboard where he says, "Give me a fascism" in this episode, or was it the next one? I genuinely can't remember.
No, it's episode 4 where, trust me, I wrote that down. Fascism chant, episode 4.
So I just have to point out, there's zero evidence in episode 3 of the police celebrating fascism. Just none.
When Martin finally tracks down Larson, he does not arrest him. Instead, he invites him to a diner where they have a lot in common. My favorite scene, this is the one thing I really want to talk about here. My favorite scene in this whole episode is when Martin goes to question Diana, and they are both talking like they're on ether.
Yep.
And it's what Jesse was making fun of with our cold open tonight, of he's questioning her. They're having a conversation. She's hiding murder.
Mm-hmm.
And they sound like they're delivering hostage letters to each other. But neither one of them speak the same language. That's the other thing it feels like. Jenna Malone says something to him. Miles Teller doesn't acknowledge it, just asks another question 20 minutes later. And she blinks twice, possibly for help. And then she says something else. He no-sells it again, and the pattern just repeats for an interminable amount of time. Like, we've watched, I said it before, we've watched enough cop shows. We know how even a casual interrogation goes. And that's when I was like, oh, this in no way is like a gritty crime noir. This is a commentary about whatever the hell is pissing Refn off at the moment in 2019. This is a commentary about, among other things, the police. He's speaking to something about the nature of humanity. I'm not quite certain what, but that's all this is, and that's all these exchanges end up being. Because there's no way he directed that scene and went, there's no way that he directed that scene and was like, yeah, that's how this goes. The realism of a gritty crime noir completely evaporates out of the show at this point.
Yes, I agree. Man. So, my notes, I gravitated towards the conversation between him and the Vigo at the diner. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where he's talking to him, just out in the open, right there in the diner, about killing people. That's talk about evaporating reality. They're discussing this.
While the hostess,
serving him pie,
is in earshot because she comes over when they say, "Hey, coffee," and they say it without that tone of voice.
I know, man. So, in that conversation is pretty much the absolute motivation of Miles Teller, and the quote is something along the lines of, "I killed a woman, and her kids were in the other room, and I didn't feel anything." That's evident. There, throughout the whole series, you are waiting for Martin to react to something. And it's almost like every character does something so obscene that you're like, well, certainly he's got to blink at this. Nope, no blinking.
If you're lucky, he'll spit.
Yes, if you're lucky.
Somebody made a comment about that, about the spit to dialogue ratio being way off. Let me just take a minute here, Jesse, because I want to talk to you about something related to how you deal with podcasts. So you do a lot of notes. You're quite the opposite of me. You come in with a lot of notes. And I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to use Grammarly to type out your show notes for podcasts, your summaries for the comic books that you used to talk about on source material. Have you ever used Grammarly before, Jesse?
I can't say that I have. Tell me about it.
Well, let me tell you that Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. Now, I've heard you usually write great notes, but occasionally you've pulled I don't know what the hell I wrote here. If you use Grammarly, Jesse, you could fix that, and your notes would be smooth as butter. Did you know that?
No, I do now, though. That sounds fantastic.
Absolutely. Robert Winfrey, you could use Grammarly to do your coverage for 411 when you do the UFC fights and whatnot, and the SmackDown coverage that's slowly driving traffic away. Did you know that Grammarly could help you with your coverage?
I'm sure the AI would take one look at what I wrote and just kill itself.
Well, for those of you who want to work with an AI that isn't suicidal, for you listeners of Damn You Hollywood on the W2M network, Grammarly is offering a free download of the Grammarly software. Go to Grammarly today at getgrammarly.com, W2M network. Again, that's getgrammarly.com, W2M network to download Grammarly for free. All right.
Also smooth as butter, Mark Radlich's transition game, ladies and gentlemen.
Go ahead and talk to me about episode 3 there, Mr. Winfrey.
I don't dislike Vigo. I actually wanted to see a little bit more of him and by the time the show was over. Unfortunately, he's sidetracked because we must follow more of Miles Teller. or the life model decoy resembling Miles Teller, as the case may be.
Yeah.
This is turning into a drinking game. Every time we name something Miles Teller, block of wood, stack of cement, mannequin, take a drink.
Again, we get the introduction of Deanna DeYoung, who's a little bit of a catalyst for stuff that's going on here. She'll be kind of in and out for the rest of it. The time he spends in the police, in the bullpen, with the other homicide detectives, I have, again, the next episode is where they go, yay, fascism. But because it is erroneously listed as being part of episode 3, I feel like I may as well talk about it here. Again, it's very, very easy to say, well, this is Refn's take on the police force. He thinks they're all a bunch of, fascists and democracy-hating loons, and they must be stopped. These are, the worst people in the world, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not saying that that's, certainly out of bounds or out of line or anything. It might very well be that that's the case. I actually get a little bit of something different from this, though, and this, again, becomes more true as there are more interactions with the police. In fact, there's one line in a later episode where Damien overhears he overhears a conversation between Martin and one of the other detectives, and his takeaway from this, he looked at it, tell me that isn't a real cop.
It's one of the best lines of the show. Yes, tell me that motherfucker isn't really a cop.
And that was the one line that I think made it in from The Wire to this show. I actually do kind of think that the commentary here is so ludicrously over the top, even in the context of this show, which is itself very over the top given the style in which it's presented. I wonder if he's not making more of a commentary on how police are portrayed by Hollywood and the general establishment, more so than reflecting his own feelings.
Yeah,
it's just a loose thought on my part, but
well, it's funny.
It would be way for how. I mean, subtle may not be exactly the right word, but you get my meaning. For how, subtle is not the right word, but for how deliberate and nuanced elements of this show are, for something to be that on the nose would be just it's wildly out of character for the rest of the show, I think.
Well, you just reminded me of something, speaking of The Wire. The actor that plays Carver said in a documentary about The Wire, he said, cops have gone up to the cast members of that show, him included, and have talked about how great they think The Wire is, if and only because it's a closer representation of what it's really like to be a cop than most Hollywood portrayals. And he jokingly says, every cop show, they're pulling their guns out, they're pulling their guns out, they're pulling their guns out. And he goes, I've met cops that said, I haven't pulled my gun out in 30 years. Something like that. And so, I think Refn might be commenting on the romanticized notion of police work.
Well, I don't just mean that. I also think he might be commenting on, yeah, sure, this is what every moron thinks goes on in a police station. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're all fascists who openly go, yay, Nazism, or some such.
Well, that's what I use the phrase romanticism. I think because I think that there's the perception of the
not in the positive, but in this case the negative.
That the public romanticizes what it's like to imagines what it's like to be a cop, good, bad, or indifferent, and he might be commenting on that as well.
Out their guns, and every Hollywood writer thinks that they're, again, like these people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, let's move on to volume 4, The Tower. Martin and Larson begin working together to murder pedophiles for Diana. After one successful job, Larson monologues about how humans used to have to be animals to survive. As civilization evolved, the animal side stayed behind us. He thinks society is about to collapse due to global warming and rising fascism. The instinctual, violent side of humans will come back. He believes it's up to them to protect the innocence in humanity as much as they can. Meanwhile, influenced by his mentor, Martin begins to question the killings he is doing for Damien's gang. He is asked to kill a Korean man and unsuccessfully tries to learn why from his employers. Jesse, I hope your notes talk about that, because I know that was something you wrote to me about. From the man himself, Martin learns he owes $8,000. After he manages to get Martin the money, Damien agrees to let him live. Martin requests that he only be given the worst possible people to kill. Damien suggests 2 infamous porn directors. All right, Jesse, I know this is where you completely lost your shit with this show.
Oh.
And the pacing of the dialogue.
Winfrey, do you still have the stopwatch up?
I do, in fact.
Oh, good. All right, so just real quick, for the sequence about the Korean who gets his finger chopped off, really the only note that I had about that is Hideo Kojima is the one that chops the guy's finger off. And for those who do not know who Hideo Kojima is, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, but he is the guy behind Metal Gear. And I think Death Stranding, I think that's the if you play video games, you're going to recognize those names, which I thought was a really interesting tidbit. But I just know that, this is the part where in the previous episode I was getting excited because we're going to have this like vigilante team, okay? As much excitement as I can get about this show, that's where I was like, oh, okay, neat. Martin's going to be like this vigilante, goes out with Vigo and wrecks shit with, and takes care of the underworld, some of the skeeziest bosses under there. But it's also here where he questions Damien. He questions, I don't want to kill these guys if it's in regards to just money. Tell me what he did. And he gets the guy to get the money, and he pays back Damien, which I was totally expecting Damien just to kill the guy as soon as he came back with the money. But no, Damien's a good dude. He's like, okay, you got it all here. You better go get your finger looked at. I was like, all right, pretty cool. But yeah, okay, so we've already talked about the fascism chant. All right, that was note number 1. We're not going to cover that again because that was legitimately where I sent Mark a message. I was like, what the fuck is going on here? All right, we'll set it aside. So here we go. Robert Winfrey, I want you to start the stopwatch on the count of 3, and then I'm going to read some dialogue, and then I'll kind of explain to you what actually happened in the show. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. What did he do? Who? The Korean guy. Lots of bad stuff. Yeah? Like what? If I have to explain everything to you, we will be here forever. Stop.
Okay.
What's the time?
14 seconds.
14 seconds. That is the amount of time between the phrase "like what" and if I have spoken, or if I have to explain everything, we'll be here forever. The whole exchange in this show took 63 seconds. 1 minute and 3 seconds.
I mean, to be fair, apparently Damien wasn't lying. If he did, in fact, have to explain, the pauses between dialogue would have lasted until the approximate heat death of the universe.
Yes, indeed. That is exactly what I wrote. I said truer words were never spoken. It is. I could not. I'm on episode 4, and I'm like, there's no hope for me to actually enjoy this series if I have to endure this over and over and over. When it comes to the pauses, I think for myself, and again, this is just personally me, there's thousands of people out there that love this show. Trust me, go on any comment board that is talking about this show, you're going to find people that praise what Refn has done. But for me personally, it takes me out every time. And that's the one thing you don't want to do. I think in my notes were, if you have a pause between dialogue, it's just simple dialogue of 3 words or less. And it's more than let's just say it's 12 seconds. 4 seconds, people are going to start anticipating what the other person's going to say, and the other 8 seconds are them picking up their phone to see what's going on Facebook. Okay, that's what it did to me. I'm sorry, I'm average Joe TV watcher. That's just me. I'm not meant for this series, but that's why I think you get a lot of divisive opinions about this. That right there is criminal. 63 seconds to get 14 seconds of dialogue out of the way. This series would have been so much shorter, just with the dialogue short.
We have to talk about not necessarily right now, but we have to talk about how long this thing took to film it before we're done here.
Well, I can tell you that, at the beginning in our first episode, the cop took a picture, he took a selfie with a flip phone. I think that's when they started filming this. Flip phones were around, and they finally finished it up in 2019. Thank goodness.
All right, your thoughts on episode 4? If not, we'll move on to the next thing. Robert.
This isn't quite where the show started to lose me necessarily. I was struggling with again some of the specific choices that were being made, especially the dialogue. It's just so not necessary for it to be stretched out the way that it is. Vigo's little bit of like self-righteous pontification I could have done without, but it's also kind of necessary to. It's necessary to some of the overall themes that that the show is trying to touch on. So again, I can live with it.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm not offended by the waxing philosophical that many of the characters do. That's kind of the nature of this show.
Yeah, again, I can deal with it if it wasn't designed as though every other line of dialogue had a pregnant philosophical pause between it that seems. Wherein at least one of the people involved in the scene is meant to be reading Plato's The Republic off screen, I guess? I don't know.
Somebody made a comment about... They were talking specifically about Miles Teller, but you could say this about a lot of the cast here that speak in the same cadence and tempo, that they seem to be learning the English language as they're speaking it.
Yeah.
I can see it. I can see it.
So...
There's that. There might have been something else from this episode in particular. Again, this is where we actually get the fascism thing that I still don't really understand what he was going for with that particular depiction of law enforcement, but
and there, sitting in the middle, stone-faced, no emotion, is
I will.
Miles Teller.
Well, look, I'll say this about that. Teller as the stone-faced, non-emotive guy, I think only works when he's in those absurd situations.
Oh, I told Mark, I said I wanted more of him in the police unit. I wanted to see more of that.
Yeah, no, that's what I was saying before. Like, when it's just Miles sort of being an anchor, literally, surrounded surrounded by moving objects.
You should see them try to get his pants on. It's interesting.
I don't find it as off-putting. My problem is like in scene episode 3 when he has the conversation with Jenna Malone, and it's like I can't, or Damien in this episode. I can't do it. I can't do people not constantly not talking at a normal cadence and pace, and so, I think that was a mistake by Refn. I honestly think that really should have been reserved for Miles as a part of his character.
Maybe the only other one that I think maybe they could have got away with it is Jesus, because he fills kind of the same role for just the other parallel story.
Yeah, and that would have been fine. But either Jesus or Yuritsa for the same reason, but not both, and not 97 other characters in this show.
Yeah. I want to say there was some kind of interaction between Martin and Janie in this episode that annoyed me, but I couldn't swear to it.
Yeah, they make up after the initial fight throughout the course of some of these episodes, and they're fine there for a bit. and we'll spend some time with her later with Yuritsa and this other character who speaks like a normal person. Shortly thereafter, Volume 5, my favorite episode of this entire show.
I can imagine why.
This is the high point of the show for me, for a variety of reasons. Martin stalks the pornographers. Now, I'm not quite sure what order to do this in, because I really want to talk about this opening scene. But all right, let me get through the plot synopsis, and then I'll double back.
Yeah, just read the 2 paragraphs that are on Wiki, and then the opening scene is genuinely one of the most disturbing things in this entire show. And considering how much this tries to disturb you, and again, mostly somewhat succeeds, this bit just was woof.
Martin stalks the pornographers. Eventually, they stop to drink at a bar where he casually gets to know them. They suggest he make a movie with him in it. As they're about to take off his clothes, Martin shoots everyone in the room dead. He goes to the studio looking for the rest before giving up and getting in his car. 2 remaining pornographers get into an electric car to chase him, but have trouble keeping up. We're going to talk at length about that. As dawn breaks, the car runs out of power. Martin backs up into them and kills one of them. As he is about to shoot the other, he mentions a girl who's going to die out in the desert, mistakenly believing Martin is after her. The director takes Martin to the desert, where they dig up a chest containing a chained girl. Really. The director frees her, warning her about Martin in Spanish. He draws a knife and lunges at Martin, who shoots him dead. As Martin helps the girl out of the chest, she grabs the knife and stabs him in the side before running out, because no good deed in the show goes unpunished. All right, so this opening scene was in a very weird... I got a Tarantino vibe. You know, Tarantino, one of the modern masters, much like Alfred Hitchcock, of building tension in a scene. I'm reminded of Inglourious Basterds, the opening scene with Christoph Waltz, where he's drinking the milk and he's talking to the farmer, and of course you've got the Jews in hiding underneath the floorboards. And, you know, it's a long conversation about the milk, and then the camera pans down and you see the girls and how frightened they are and everything, and they pan back up to Christoph Waltz, and he's sort of, you know, then he kind of moves the conversation to the point where, you know, he needs to know where the Jews are. Something along those lines. There's elements of this in Jackie Brown, to a degree, I think in Pulp Fiction. I'm thinking, I want to say like the Christopher Walken monologue being the first one that jumps out at me. But, you know, this idea of, it's just characters talking, but as they're talking, you see dread like a tub filling up with water that's just rising and rising and rising, and then finally it overflows, and much like, again, like a Tarantino scene, just explodes in violence. And here, the opening scene is of this now 18-year-old kid who has agreed to be in a pornographic film, and he doesn't quite know what he's gotten himself into, and the director is trying to get him to be at ease and let his guard down, and, you know, and kind of prepare him for what's going to happen. And then at the end of, and you can see him getting more and more nervous and getting more and more uncomfortable, and now he doesn't want to do it, at which point the pornographer gets up and says, okay, well, I'm going to leave you in these guys' hands now, and it's like a room full of burly men, and he goes, okay, boys, rape him, and walks out of the room. And you're like, that is horrifying. What a trip that took me on.
This is that sequence. There's a couple of things about this show that ultimately, I don't want to get too far into, you know, like final thoughts here. Ultimately, I can't hate this show because there's a handful of sequences in particular that, when they work, are just so unbelievably powerful.
Yeah.
Even if they are disturbing and disgusting, they work, and that's what they're supposed to do. And I can't dismiss it because because it's not something I would necessarily seek out on my own. And this is, I think, the best sequence in this entire show. And you could take that single. I don't know how long it was in particular. However many number of minutes. But you could take that sequence, just that, and that should be studied by people getting into film about how to build, again, tension with just dialogue and performance. It is brilliant in that respect.
Yeah, that needs to go into like an anatomy of a scene textbook. Go ahead, Jesse.
I was just going to say, it's extremely minimalist. There's hardly anything going on except dialogue and the expressions on their faces. And that's it. And it's really, just like Winfrey said, powerful because it gets you to feel extremely uneasy. And my first 4 words are starts out really uncomfortable. And it does. I mean, it really I did not want to. I was so afraid of what I was going to see. And we don't see anything, really. You just hear as he walks out. But that's one thing that Refn gets a lot of times is that even though there's these huge, long pauses, you're anticipating something terrifying that you don't want to see possibly could happen. And that has it written all over this scene. You're like, oh, man, what am I going to see next?
That I feel like is a lot of Refn, is leaving a lot of things up to the audience to figure out, decide, imagine. I said before, like he's the only person I would want on this podcast to ask him what are you trying to do here. But I'm almost afraid that I would hate the interview because his answer would always be, well, what do you think? I asked you, motherfucker. I know what I think. And he, and he's like, well, it could be whatever you want it to be. And I'm like, fuck you, get off my podcast.
Yeah. I learned nothing, damn it.
This was a waste of everyone's time.
Well, then you certainly learned something, didn't you?
Yes, don't have guests on about their own stuff. Yeah, this was this is going to sound weird, and it's not. And I don't want people to interpret this as, especially after I've admitted that I've watched Irreversible and some other choice pieces. There's a French rape film that I saw around the same time, and I think it might have been just called Rape or something like that. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is I kept thinking about that. I was watching this. I'm like, wow, this reminds me of that so much. I wish I could remember the name of it. That aside. The theme of what's going on in that scene isn't what I need to see more of. Like, I don't really need to see some poor schmuck get raped by a bunch of burly men. When I say I wish I had more of this in this show, like straightforward, well-acted, tension-building and release and ultra-violence and, just like that's the kind of things you go to a show like this for, and that you had to wait till episode 5 to get it because the rest of it is mumbling into a neon-lit night sky with pregnant pauses and pseudo-philosophical waxing and the occasional gunplay. And I'm like, ugh, like, I want more of what I got in the first 5 minutes of this episode. And unfortunately, this thing took a weird left turn about midway through this episode.
The supreme irony being, well, hold on. There might be a meta joke here because they are technically in New Mexico, so this show might literally have missed the left turn at
Albuquerque. Yes, indeed.
But yeah, I wish the show had been more of this and not everything else we got because that's the kind of show I wanted to watch. Unfortunately, I'm also a goofball, and so the next thing that happens. So fast forwarding to this long drawn out bit where he infiltrates himself within the group of pornographers.
You don't want to have a long discussion about this character, about the nuance of this character actually opening up to these guys about how he met Janie.
I'll let you do that.
I most certainly will not. So he's trying to ingratiate himself within this group so he knows who to kill and why to kill them.
And you're right. He has this whole conversation about how he started fucking a 16-year-old, and it went on from there. By the way, and I think it was she was a witness to an investigation that he was involved in.
No. He more or less tells the truth without. He omits some of the details, like that he's a cop.
Mm-hmm.
But Janie watched her mother walk into traffic.
Right.
And
okay.
he was one of the first responders. And I tend to think he's being truthful here when he says, "Yeah, and then that just kind of turned me on, so went back and I screwed her on the hood of my car that same night."
Like you do.
Well, the skeevy porn director's response to this confession is, "You're my hero."
Yeah, I almost wish they had a different actor for just that one scene. One that sort of would talk with a little bit more passion, because it's a great scene. It's a great exchange of dialogue. Unfortunately, half of it was delivered by a block of wood. But yeah, this leads to them coercing in quotes, into doing a porno with them, and they do rape porn. So, on the one hand, he's setting them up to get murdered, but they're setting him up to get raped. It's a weirdly tense, exchange and scene. Anyway, they get him to the set. The set is like a warehouse. And
can I just say real quick before we get to that part, I got extremely lost when it was the brother hosing down the woman in the shower stall. I didn't know where I was at. I didn't know who I was watching. And I was like, who's this new guy? And what's this girl doing there? I thought it was Janie at first. I couldn't tell. I was watching it on a phone, so forgive me. But regardless, I was lost until he finally walked out, and then I realized it was the brother. But then, yes, Martin makes it to the warehouse, and we get some action. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't... Can we just talk about that for 1 second? So you have this great opening scene with the poor kid, and then you have Martin who introduces himself to the porno guys, and they're all talking, and then there's a brief moment to where a girl gets hosed in the shower.
Yep. It's not a brief moment? Did you say a brief moment? Are you confused, sir? Because it was not brief.
By brief, I mean it took about a half an hour.
Okay, thank you. All right.
It's not the scene in First Blood. I make sure you get behind the ears, and it's just a few minutes of them hosing. No, this was long and drawn out and weirdly brutal without actually getting violent.
Yeah. There was. I mean, the only thing that I could think that they're trying to establish here is that, the brother is obviously a shithead, and we should not like him. And that's kind of what I took out of it.
Well, the idea that some women in this show are sort of presented as chattel, and that scene being a really good example of that, definitely rings true. Why it needed a half an hour to get there, I don't understand.
No, there are so many of those. You can ask that question to a lot of scenes, and specifically, I think we're going to be getting to it, but Jesus and Yaritza, we established that in probably one scene, but again, it seems to be Refn's preference to literally grab a pile driver and run it into the ground. Because if you don't understand this guy's a bad guy, here's another 20 minutes for you to really think about it. You got to think about it. Is this guy a bad guy? Is he actually a bad guy for hosing this girl down and making her get undressed and then continuing to hose her down? Now think about it. Is he a bad guy? It's I get that. We don't have to do 20 minutes of it.
Yeah.
We don't.
Yeah, I would say if I had to say one negative thing about this that isn't about the dialogue, is that this is the most self-indulgent thing I've ever seen. I often talk about how there are projects that just need adult supervision. This is the most project that needs supervision I've ever seen. And I think there would be people who would disagree with me, who'd be like, but no, we want Refn to take his dick, dip it in paint, and smear it all over a canvas.
The art, Mark. The art.
That is exactly.
Why would you want to constrain
unrestrained
the art?
Refn coming paint on a...
Oh, jeez.
on a canvas is what we came here for. And I'm like, okay, I tend to like a bit of restraint and a bit of supervision in just about anything that I watch.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
just
at
me.
the very least, you're going to have your fans and you're going to have your haters, and that choice is as long as it makes them happy, which is exactly what an artist should feel when they're making their craft. They should be able to be happy with what they did. Now,
How dare you, sir?
Amazon obviously felt different, didn't they? At the end of the series.
I was going to say, so the people at Grammarly are going to go to check the ads, and someone's going to say to another person, "Did he just say come paint?" Anyway, so then we finally get to the part where they're trying to get him into the movie, and they're like, "We need to see your cock," which, sure. Who doesn't when you're making porn?
I was going to say, there's about 3 people that I saw quote that scene and said, "Me too." I was like, wait a second. All right, Jim.
So they're like, "We need to see your cock," and he was like, "Yeah, I need to shoot you," and so he does.
He doesn't even say anything. He does nothing. He stands there, and then the director says, "No, I really need to see it." And he still, the fly flies into his eye, walks around the eyeball, doesn't even blink, continues to exist. The girl comes over, he does nothing. Like, it's one long delayed synaptic connection with this guy.
So he wakes up from his coma and shoots these 2 people dead. Which, can I just a quick aside. So I sent the clip because of what happens next in the chat, and one of the group members responded to the gunshots. Is it me, or was there nothing about the way that they were shot to get all that excited about, but yet someone did? Did I miss something about the way that it was done?
What, you mean the gunplay, or what?
Yeah, just when he shoots the pornographer and the girl in the head, like, it's just bang, the blood flies out the back, and he falls backwards. Does it to her, she falls down. And the reaction I got in the chat was like, it's like the worst thing they'd ever seen or some shit like that. And I'm like, what? Like, I didn't think there was anything special about the way that he shot them.
There's a couple of things if we're talking just about how that played out, I guess. One is their reaction to being shot. Nobody reacts to being shot like that, but
didn't he throw his hands up in the air and fall backwards?
He got shot like Shawn Michaels bumping for Hulk Hogan. Okay.
Okay, I get that. I guess I wasn't offended by it.
Okay, which is fair. The other thing that this movie, that the show does, as it relates to blood from people being shot in the head, I hate this. I give it a pass here because everything about this movie is I gotta stop calling this a movie. Everything about this is very, very deliberately, it gets stylized and surrealistic. But someone gets shot, you see the blood spray behind them, and then it just kind of disintegrates as it drops. It never actually hits the ground. It just ceases to exist in any sort of... We have destroyed matter, which is not actually possible. So there's that, but yeah, it's the way those people reacted to being shot again. It's, like I said, Shawn Michaels and Hulk Hogan.
All right, so he shoots them. He checks out, as I said in the plot synopsis, he runs around the warehouse looking for any more bad guys to shoot. Doesn't find any. Gets in his car. About the time he gets in his car, 2 people chase after him, and I'm like, oh,
Prius.
What?
In the Prius.
In the Prius, and I'm like, oh, a car chase. Ooh, now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, nope.
Your
expectations have been severely subverted against.
I was going to say, subverted expectations, the show.
Yes.
So
that's only partially true, and to his credit, I think he does it very, very well. Some people just subvert them to subvert them, not in service to the greater story.
Well, we were talking before about, about the impression of police by on television by people who, by fans, by people who watch TV and whatever,
I guess there's the two. Nobody has a sober assessment of the police. There's the group that tends to fetishize it, and the group that tends to demonize it, and you very rarely get a lot of people talking about what's in the middle. So he kind of goes deliberately all the way in the demonization category. I think is a little bit, again, I think almost as a commentary on those people who are like, all cops are bad. Like, well, sure, here you go. Here's your wish fulfillment, dickhead. How do you like it?
So I think there's elements of that here where he's like, okay, so we're going to do a car chase, but how can we do a car chase that isn't a car chase? Which is the only rational explanation for what we're about to see next.
To be fair, this is probably okay. I've seen a lot of car chases, maybe almost as many as Mark. In point of fact, there are very few that actually move me either in terms of how they play out in the narrative or as just a thrilling experience to observe.
Yeah, I would say The Matrix Reloaded probably has my most favorite car chase ever.
That's a really good one. Look, some of the driving sequences from Fury Road are like chef's kiss perfect.
Yeah.
None of those are my favorite, though. My favorite actually comes from the first episode of Lovecraft Country.
Okay.
Because it's a low-speed chase.
Another really famous one, just for comedy's sake, is the Blues Brothers. That's probably the most famous.
The Blues Brothers one is good, but the reason I loved the one from Lovecraft Country, our group of 3 black people driving across the country are accosted by the sheriff by the white sheriff in this particular New England county, and he tells them he does the racist cop thing because everyone in that show is a racist. You can find my review of Lovecraft Country alongside Alexis Hayna if you're interested in our further thoughts about that. But he tells them, so you guys know what a sundown town is, right? And they go, yes, sir. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with that term, that was kind of any black person found in that town after sunrise was going to be killed. He says, well, this is a sundown county. Now, the line, and unfortunately for you, it's about 30 minutes until sundown, and they, we'll certainly be out of your, we will leave your jurisdiction. We can keep going. We know kind of where we are. There's a train tracks a certain ways away. We can get there. And his response is, well, okay, good luck, but you better not speed because I'm following you the whole way. And the speed limit's 35 miles an hour. So there's this gloriously tense sequence where these people are trying desperately to get across the county line before the sun sets, and this cop is right behind them tracking their speed the whole time, so they can't actually go fast. It's really great. It's one of the best scenes in that whole show. So I like things that play around with that. Here, unfortunately, we get something else that tries to play around with it, but is only partially successful.
Oh man, it almost put it almost Martin almost fell asleep during the chase.
All right.
It really did.
So it starts off with some funky, synthesizer music. It's jazzy, it's upbeat, it's everything you want a car chase to be. And and they're shooting at him, and they're getting in there, and then they get out, and then he. And he's turning fast corners, and like, oh my god, like gone in 60 seconds, holy cow! And then he gets on the interstate, and he's far enough ahead that this Prius can't catch him. So they're maintaining speed, he's maintaining speed. It's dark. There are wolves in
fairness, the other point of consideration here is, in fact, witnesses. The freeway is fairly crowded.
And so they're just kind of tracking him. Okay. In another world, in another show, they're tracking him for a variety of reasons I'd probably be okay with. I might have commented, hey, lost opportunity for an exciting car chase, but I will accept you're tracking him for whatever the reasons are. What this turns into instead was you get a POV shot of the 2 guys in the car, and they put the radio on. because they're just driving along at this point. They're just tracking him. They might as well listen to the radio. And you get you get some funky song, and the other guy is I don't want...
The driver actually wants the synthesizer.
Right. So he puts that on.
Apparently, Let's Fist Again was not on the radio at that point in time.
And then the other guy's like, I don't want to hear this. And he switches the channel, and it's Barry Manilow's Mandy. And he's like, ugh, no. He goes back to synthesizer. And he switches back to Mandy. And back to synthesizer. And back to Mandy again, and he just leaves it. And so they're driving, and it's and they pull back the shot, and the two of them are in frame, and they're just sort of spacily listening to Mandy and driving, and then Mandy takes over the entire scene.
Yep.
Okay? It goes from you're hearing it as ambient noise from the radio in the car to it becomes the soundtrack to that scene. And what you get at that point is a neon-lit car chase on a freeway set to Mandy that ends in a composite image of one of Miles Teller bleeding in with those guys, and they're shifting back and forth, and Miles Teller is tired and he's rubbing his eyes, and the other guys are rubbing their eyes, and it's just holy cow! I've never laughed so hard in my life.
Yeah, it's like he's regretting, and reliving his dead brother getting shot over and over. It's just like, my notes were, you cannot possibly slow down a car chase, right? You can't do that. There's no way. Oh, wait a second.
I laughed so hard because, I think when your expectations are subverted, but in a way that's really entertaining, it could be a really enjoyable experience. And it was like, okay, Reffin, you got me. I think that, I, of course, and this is my sense of humor, people who know me, you guys know, the old joke from this podcast about beating a dead horse. Come here, horsey. I used to have a sound effect for that. And, that's why my wife calls me Peter Griffin, because, she the bird is the word.
That's why.
Among other reasons. But this is all I would talk about for like a 24-hour period, to the point where Robert yelled at me in the chat for it. But
okay, look, Mandy sucks. There's no way around it. There's nothing you can do about it.
But that's the point. It's such a maudlin, over-the-top, romantic, ridiculous song, and it's so out of place in that scene.
Yeah,
I couldn't help but
They could have. Look, Mandy was a terrible choice. Even if you wanted to do this kind of subverted expectation, let's play against type for the car chase scene. There's so many better songs than Mandy that you could pick. Mandy is a garbage fire of a musical track.
Well, I'll tell you what.
I'm trying to tee you up.
I'll tell you what, folks. If you disagree with Robert Winfrey, and I'm sure some of you do, and you love yourself some Copacabana, you love yourself some Barry Manilow, you love Mandy the way I do.
Does anyone even know a song from Barry Manilow other than Mandy or Copacabana?
I mean, I write the songs, man.
You can't do it. You can't name a Barry Manilow song.
I just said one. I write the songs, you asshole.
If only there was a streaming service that had those songs
ow. Yes.
We have to settle this, Mark. Where should we go to settle this discussion about Barry Manilow's music?
If you want to listen to Barry Manilow's music, specifically Mandy, after seeing it used the way that it was in Too Old to Die Young, you can go on AmazonMusic.com and sign up for a free 30 days of that service, and you can listen to the essential Barry Manilow. It's right there waiting for you. You can listen to Mandy, Bandstand Boogie. It's a miracle. I write the songs, Robert Winfrey. You asked me for a Barry Manilow song besides Mandy and Copacabana, and I write the songs as one of them. Jump, shout, jump, shout, boogie, Jesse Starcher. If you want to listen to some Barry Manilow the way I know you do, you can get on AmazonMusic.com right now, right? As a matter of fact, you can go to getamazonmusic.com/W2M network to sign up for a free 30 days of Amazon Music streaming service and check it out yourself. And you can listen to all the Barry Manilow you want. Doesn't that sound wonderful?
I will. Yeah, I'm going to check that out.
Let them know we sent you. That's why you use the link, please. It'll be in the description to the podcast. Let them know we sent you. It helps us out. And look, anyone who introduces another human being to Barry Manilow, that needs to be recorded somewhere so they can be punished accordingly later.
I'm going to go on AmazonMusic.com right now, and I'm going to make Robert Winfrey a mix of all the best Barry Manilow stuff that isn't on the essential Barry Manilow, because it's all there. I could just picture right now Robert Winfrey dancing around his house to Hey Mambo.
Mm.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
All right, now that we got that out of the way. So Car Chase of Mandy, I was really caught off guard by it. It made me laugh hysterically. I shared it with everybody. I made my wife and kid watch it, and Lily's reaction to it was the best. She was like, "I am disappointed." How do you do that to a car chase? A car chase should be full of excitement. And I'm like, that's the point, Lily.
There is only one, apart from this scene where it plays a very specific role. My gimmickry about disliking Barry Manilow, while based in reality aside, I think there's only one car chase sequence in the history of television and or film that could actually be improved by the use of Mandy. That's from the most recent Fast and the Furious movie, where they're trying to drive away across a frozen inlet from a submarine that's chasing them. Like, that really does kind of need Mandy, you know?
All right, well, I have talked at length about this episode, and after the Mandy car chase, I don't even remember what happened. I was just so overwhelmed. So, Jesse, let me pitch it over to you. Your thoughts on episode 5. Shooting pornographers, Mandy car chases, the whole 9 yards.
Well, okay. I've only got a couple notes to kind of go over here, a few. So, we already discussed Mandy and the detriment that it had upon the car chase, or in Mark's case, you know, how much more it spiced it up. I also want to point out that I had my headphones in while I listened and watched this show, and in any other editing bay, the whine of the Prius would have been completely erased during a car chase. But let me tell you, it is front and center.
They use it in a really cool way. They just, anytime you would hear the engine rumble on a gas car, they just give you the Prius whine when we're looking at the Prius. It's hilarious.
Oh my gosh. I just remember going, what? Why are my ears bleeding right now? Oh, it's because the Prius. All right. So, note number 2, this motherfucker's a dead motherfucker. Okay? One of the best quotes of the series. Love it. And then at the end of the episode, you talked about how there was a girl that he said, "Oh, you're here for the girl," and Martin's like, "No, take me to her." So the girl's buried in a coffin underground, not very far underground, but she's buried alive and only got minutes to live. Whatever. So Martin tells this near, he's beat up pretty bad. He's bleeding all over the place, but he says, "You got to dig her out of there." He's like, "Well, let me go get a shovel." No, dig. Now, this was the point where I was like, Refn's going to make me watch this dude dig this hole in real time
with his bare hands.
And I was like, I'm checking out. There's no way. And it does go on for a little while, but thank goodness he doesn't take it to that level. And we were mercifully, they definitely let us go on that. So anyway, those are my notes. I mean, he rescues the girl. You'd think that Martin did the great thing here. And the girl, I assume she probably can't speak English because he's like, "I'm here to help," or "I'm not going to hurt you."
Well, hang on. He doesn't. A couple of things about that. One, he doesn't actually say anything to her. 2,
I'm not surprised. I don't know. I must have put that dialogue in. Trust me.
A normal person would have, in fact, tried to say something comforting, or he was trying to say something comforting, but his allotted 7.5 seconds hadn't passed yet, and she was like, "Nope, f this, I'm out." I actually, at different points in this show, the Spanish will be translated or untranslated.
Yeah.
I wound up just turning on the captions for giant sections of this so I could know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually did see/hear what he said to her when he was getting her out. He actually says, relax, calm down, you don't want to make him mad. He cuts the ones that make him mad. So he's actually setting her up to, like, I'm giving you to this guy, behave yourself, so that even if he dies, which he does, she's still gonna. She gives him a little bit of the knife and then runs off into the desert to die of exposure.
Yeah, she's dead. It's like all that trouble. Well, that's all my notes for that episode. It was. I would agree that this was probably one of my favorite episodes as well out of the series. I really enjoyed it. There's some wacko stuff that's about to hit us in these next 4, but next 5. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Look, the last thing I want to say about this episode, to get back to that opening scene because it is so good. There's nothing quite as chilling to me. Again, if we're talking about spoken dialogue, the last line, again before the "Okay, boys, rape him," when the skeezy director just goes, looks at this poor kid and goes, "Can I just see you smile one more time?" That is, again, amongst phrases you can say to someone in the English language to freak them out that might seem a little bit innocuous, that really does have to be up near the top.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Volume 6, The High Priestess. We're back to this again. Yaritza and Jesus marry and decide to return to Los Angeles. In preparation, they arrange to have Damien killed, but the wrong man is hit.
That was funny, actually.
Yeah, you get to see the economics of a hit, which was pretty interesting, like how the trickle-down effect happened.
Jesus humiliates his subordinate for the failure. Lady Yaritza goes to a party arranged by one of Jesus' friends from before Mexico. She ends up playing a guessing game with Janie, which Janie loses when she incorrectly guesses that Yaritza is lying about killing 23 people. That was a hard slap, by the way.
Mark, what did the 5 fingers say to the face?
I don't know, Jesse. What did the 5 fingers say to the face? Yep. I was talking about Kid the other day, and every time she brought up, like, Demon Slayer or whatever, I was just like, talk about something else. Smack! Like Sylvester the cat, saying smack out loud and then make the slapping sound. And she was like, why do you have to say smack every time? And I'm like, smack! For winning, Yaritza is allowed to slap Janie, which she does more than once, even pushing her to the floor and putting her foot on her. Back home, Yaritza tells Jesus that she is his mother reincarnated, because of course she'd be. Jesus seems to accept this and calls her his mother as he moves to perform oral sex on her. So a couple of things about this episode.
Can you hear me shaking my head?
Okay.
I can hear a couple of things rattling around in there. Yes.
So, one, hell of a slap. I thought that was pretty cool.
Stephanie McMahon slap. Like, that was a good one.
Yeah. So at the very end, where he's gearing up to go down on her, there was a part of me that thought he was just going to devour her whole like a giant python.
Would not have been out of touch with the tenor of the show.
Yeah.
No. Like, I honestly thought he was going to dislodge his jaw and just go, walk. The way... Because they changed the camera angle to where it's like a POV shot from the vantage point of her vagina. It was vagina cam. And
all you saw was like a couple knees.
Yeah, he's just right in there. It's a great shot. Very few like it in cinematic history, I would imagine. But it's a little unnerving. Yeah. The scene of the party up until the slap is interminable, but you could say that about a lot of scenes in this.
Yeah. The entire opening segment for this show for this episode takes forever.
Is this the episode? Wait, is this the episode where the white neighbor comes into the house and thinks Yuritsa's the help?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I did want to talk about that. I want to make sure I was in the right episode. So I love that scene because it's yet another one where, like, she's a dead woman. She has to be. The way they're building this up, the way they're building tension between her and Jesus, and Yuritsa's just standing there. Yuritsa's going to chop this woman's head off with a fucking samurai sword.
Yep.
And then doesn't. Mm-hmm. This is the most cinematic blue balls I've ever had. Like everything was pointing to she's a dead woman, and she's just like, okay, well, you've been here long enough. You need to go. She's like, you're right, I do. And she leaves. And they're like, wait, what the fuck happened?
Yeah, we get this is where character-wise, Jesus is kind of acclimating himself, coming back into America and actually, living in his mom's old house and trying to get used to civility. And I think one of the things that he tells Yuritsa is that, we kind of got to blend in here. And he has this kind of softer side to him that you can see the side that he had prior to going down to Mexico and becoming a killer. And well, he was already a killer before he went down there. But you know what I'm saying? Before he became really deep into the cartel. So it's interesting to see Jesus and his character development. That's pretty much all this is, because we go from the softer side of him running into his friends, that's having the party, and then we really get into this, the psychological issues that this guy has.
Oh,
and,
so
gosh, so this is the episode where I was like, okay, yeah, clearly he's got problems. We could have left it at that. We could have left it at that. I understand.
Hold on. We could have left it where this episode leaves it, but oh no.
No, we cannot. Yeah. So the other thing that I was going to say was that this was the part where they had Alfonso come in, who, he's a little bit too big for his britches, working for Jesus. And Jesus he's got to lay down the law and make Alfonso realize, hey, you're dealing with me. You can't mess around with me. So he does his thing, and he makes Alfonso get on his knees and bark like a mule. So Alfonso starts to bark, and he tells him, no, bark in English. I was like, okay, all right, I'm done. But I could tell things were getting weird when Jesus was daydreaming about his mom at the side of the pool, and then we hard cut to him in his, I guess, his swimming briefs or whatever, and his crotch. I mean, it is the only thing that is in focus, and I was like, we're going into territory that I'm going to, no, please, oh, okay. And then, of course, the way the episode ended, I was like, well, I'm not surprised.
Robert?
I don't have a whole lot to add to any of that. It's...
What was Damien doing out dancing like zombies in front of his ice rink? Can you tell me that, Winfrey?
No, he wasn't dancing.
Okay.
He's practicing with his machete.
Oh, this was the one where... Oh, I thought he was outside dancing at that point. I could have been wrong.
Oh, wait, you mean the time when they shoot it, when the cokehead shoots the wrong guy? Oh, I got no idea. Just he's out there having a good time. He's cutting the rug.
Okay, all right.
Look, he's the only black man in all of California that owns an ice rink. Let the man let his hair down every now and then.
Volume 7, The Magician. Martin has taken sick leave after being stabbed. He spends his free time celebrating Janie's 18th birthday and killing more pedophiles with Larson. Theo, Janie's father, makes more sexual advances towards Martin when they are alone. He ends up inviting Martin to see a movie, which appears similar to the show itself. Afterwards, Theo starts masturbating while talking about Janie, causing Martin to kill him. Larson helps Martin get rid of the body. Martin then throws up and confesses who Theo was to Larson and admits that he isn't sure why he killed him. I just made the crusty face. He says he doesn't want to be a police officer anymore. Sure. Larson and Martin...
One of those is so much like the other.
Larson and Martin visit Damien's gang to cut ties with them, only to find everyone dead and Damien's severed hand. Somewhere else, Jesus describes to a captive Damien all the ways he is going to torture him. Damien suggests that Jesus kill him quickly in exchange for telling him who actually killed his mother. Surprised, Jesus agrees, and Damien tells him about Martin. Yaritza kills Damien as he laughs hysterically. So let's talk for the next hour and a half at length about Theo.
Nope.
Billy Baldwin having a
Billy
weird...
Baldwin doing the best Ric Flair impression you'll ever see.
So I was going with Trump, and not that I want this to turn into like a political thing, but like the weird... Okay, you don't like Trump. How about Vince McMahon when he's looking down Stephanie McMahon's wedding dress? Ugh. Having one of those moments while talking about his daughter and then starting to masturbate. There are certain parts of this show that are probably not supposed to make you laugh, but this was the second time I laughed hysterically at this show.
Oh, yeah. I mean, at this point, you've given up on trying to make sense of things. And you're just like, there's that. There he is.
Here's what... Something about that... Here's what doesn't quite sit right with me about that particular scene, and it has nothing to do with...
One thing. Sorry.
I just want you to understand my existential horror at this particular sequence. Not for anything, not for Baldwin, not for the implied incest, none of that. That's passé for this universe, right? The fact that this universe has its own version of this show.
Yeah.
If this does not give you existential dread on a level that I can barely articulate, I don't know what to tell you. I envy you your ignorance.
Did it say in the synopsis that they're explaining, like, was this something he was aware of that happened with Martin, or are the show...
That doesn't make... Again, that's what's kind of implied, even though it doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, it makes no sense to me.
Because, well, Baldwin... again, Theo has a line where he says to... Because he shows Martin this, and it's very clearly meant to be something that Martin and his old partner Larry had done, but again, could sort of recast and dramatized. There's actually I'm 90% sure there's a reference self-insert line from Baldwin here, because he asks Martin about what'd you think of it, and Martin goes, "It's okay," and he goes, "You wouldn't know art if it punched you in the face." Like, not exactly subtle there, buddy.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
But it's loosely implied, but I think never stated, that somehow Baldwin found out about some on-job impropriety that Martin did, showed him that here, and was now going to use that as leverage against him, because he does have the line, "Well, now that I own you."
Yeah, see, that's what made me think, okay, he's aware of what happened. And I still was like, how do you own him? Like, with this show? Oh, all right, whatever. So, we don't have to worry about that for very long after that. As soon as he finishes up, Martin makes sure.
We're not entirely sure that he might have needed the belt around the neck to finish.
Oh, no. God.
The only thing that would have made that him masturbating even funnier is if he had been holding the tiger while he was doing it.
Picking it up.
Hold on. He was using the tiger. Come on.
Making the tiger look over the seat back at Martin at the same time. This is like...
Be the tiger, Martin. Be the tiger.
Anything else, guys, about episode 7 here?
This is another episode where, at the end of it, I just decided I couldn't hate... There's parts in the first little bit of this show that just really, really tried my patience. I'm okay with slower paced stuff. I'm okay with the experimental, the surrealistic, I'm okay with all of that. But this show really tried my patience at times. But then, as the handless Damien is being menaced by Jesus, and Jesus' threat to him is just a slightly tweaked version of Wesley's speech about to the pain to Humperdinck at the end of The Princess Bride. I lost it. I just lost it. I laughed. I said, okay, I think I said this in one of our chats. That's it. I can't hate this show anymore. That whole sequence is just him doing Wesley to Prince Humperdinck. I'm done. This is now forever. I can't hate it. I just can't hate it anymore.
Yeah.
Bad.
Volume 8, The Hanged Man. The police form a bizarre nationalistic play about Jesus
Oh my
to
god.
Martin
hang on.
as a goodbye.
Hang on. I have one thing to say about whoever wrote the synopsis for that one.
Yeah.
I do not understand what's nationalistic about this.
I don't know. The one
Like-
guy running in to stab him with the spear yelling, "Democracy is my bitch."
Okay, I mean, there's a degree to you can argue the degree to which nationalism and fascism overlap, and certainly there are parts of the Venn diagram that do. But a giant part of nationalism, especially if we're talking about American nationalism, is in fact a belief in democracy. This is just the weirdest passion play you've ever seen. It's not actually nationalistic in the way that's being implied by whoever wrote that.
Did one of the Romans yell out like fake news or
Yes.
something?
As he's running away after having stabbed the guy while
Fake news.
the last stab is for the NRA.
That one scene could be just picked apart, and every aspect of it is just why,
Okay.
why,
No.
why?
That whole scene justifies itself for one sequence. If nothing else. When the fat cop playing Mary Magdalene turns out to suddenly be the best actor in this entire series.
Oh, Red, I think is his name. I think it
Sure.
is. Oh my gosh.
But when he runs off screaming in agony, in the emotional pain of having seen this, and suddenly something in this show makes me feel something other than bizarre revulsion or unintentional comedy.
And he goes through the whole thing. He goes through the whole speech, and then he has the captain has this thing where at the kind of how he finishes his speeches is he all of a sudden takes on this effeminate, this a real effeminate speech pattern, and you're like, why are we doing this?
Did you happen to read the whiteboard during that scene? Because
Oh.
I did.
No, was there?
Well, in fact, "Democracy is my bitch" is written there because
Okay.
in case that singular deputy forgot his line. There's like
It said like 8 times below that.
there's I think there's one that says like fascism is good or something like
Oh.
it's I don't understand it, but
That's great.
So, meanwhile, Janie reports her father missing and admits to police that she's been in a relationship with Martin since she was 16. Martin kills another pedophile with Larson, who is getting too sick to continue the work. When Martin helps him to bed, Larson asks him to hold him. They embrace for a long time. Janie and Martin...
that was actually a great scene because Leo's dying from some kind of he's on dialysis, so there's something seriously wrong with him. They never get into specifics. But that scene where he's just kind of, getting progressively iller and just sitting on the bed and just desperate for some kind of human connection like that to someone else who understands a little bit of who he is and what he does. Genuinely good scene.
Janie and Martin go to the beach where Jesus' men arrive, killing Janie and capturing Martin. Yaritza continues to secretly kill cartel members. She asks the women she frees to spread the word of the High Priestess of Death. Yaritza and Jesus... And Jesse Starcher's favorite part of this episode, engage in sadomasochistic sex, while Yaritza playing the dominant role.
Okay, I have a minor gripe with this.
Yes.
The misconstruing of sadism / masochism with dominant or submissive is a real aggravating point for me. I don't recall anything expressly sadomasochistic about that particular encounter. Yaritza is very much the dominant force,
And she's just fucking him with a dildo, right?
Sure,
A
there's some
strap-on.
That's at the end of it's the end of the whip,
Is
Whatever.
it? Okay.
the hilt or whatever it is.
the handle. Sure, whatever. Point being, that's not again, that's really not sadomasochistic. Penetration like that, sure, it can potentially be painful, I've been told, but we're not dealing with more of the kind of accoutrement or other acts that you might more associate with that. And I'm fairly certain that Refn has seen enough bondage porn to understand the difference. So again, whoever wrote the synopsis here did that is an inaccurate assessment of what goes on there.
Is at this point he's made up like his mom?
No, that's later.
Okay.
That's the next sex scene.
Okay.
After torturing Martin for 3 days, Jesus decapitates him, and I'm left wondering, what are we going to do for 2 more episodes?
Well, your answer.
Yeah. I honestly wish the show didn't have 2 more episodes. I wish it kind of ended. I honestly wish it didn't have any more episodes. I wish, instead, this had just been a little bit longer. They wrapped it up and we were done. But we're going to get 2 more episodes after this. I don't have a whole lot to say about episode 8. I will tell you that I'm glad you spoke to the scene between them because I honestly didn't remember it. I think shortly after he leaves the police station and the fascism scene that was oh so hilarious, I kind of faded out, dozed off, whatever, because the next thing I remember is Janie being shot on the beach. And I'm like, oh no.
Wait a second. What is going on?
Let me say this. So we've made fun of Miles Teller's performance in quotes, the entirety of this podcast. But I don't think the breadth of his performance is really understood until you show extended scenes of Jesus whipping him and him no-selling it.
Oh, yeah. No selling.
I mean, when you talk about, he doesn't react to anything, including being beaten to near death, I'm surprised he sold the decapitation.
Look, hang on. He pulled the creative control clause in his contract. It happens out of frame.
I'm not.
His head kind of rolls off, and then zoom in on his face, and he blinks slowly.
That's the thing. Like Jesus should have decapitated him, and we should have had a pull back to a wide angle shot of him just walking around headless in a circle.
Just kind of standing in his side, leaning up against the post.
That's why Jesus has to keep hitting him with the machete.
Jesse, anything about number 8 here?
So there's a song. My notes go as such. In this one part, it's one small section. There's a song, I think that Jesus... No, I think it's Alfonso. Alfonso's dancing. Is this the one where we have the discussion about
next?
Is that next? Okay. Well, anyway, Let's Fist Again, which I did not know existed. I have to go on to Amazon Music and find out if that track is there. What a fantastic track. And then it says, now Martin is not selling the whip. Yaritza is giving Jesus a happy ending. Oh, no. That was pretty much how that went. And then I think I remember the end of this episode. Obviously, it was shocking. But the way that it ended so abruptly,
this was
really
not
kind of
even by this show's. This was not the abrupt ending, even by this show's standards. It drug out.
When I say that, I mean his head gets chopped off, and usually I'm used to the little box showing up down at the bottom, and either a fade out or something.
We have to watch Jesus hit the decapitated head and the corpse a few dozen times while Yaritza reclines against the wall of the stables. And then our stinger, our little teaser for the next episode, when we see the beings that speak to Deanna, to Miss DeYoung, trying to coax her into somehow having a vision of these goings on.
That was my final thing. Was what the hell is with the alien kids? I'm looking there at these silver beings or whatever, and I'm like, where is this series going now? I should have never even thought of him as a main character, but it's the guy we followed around most of the episodes. He died. Okay, we got 2 episodes left, and all of a sudden there's aliens. What is happening?
I wish there had been aliens.
That's all I got.
Robert?
There's an interesting observation that I think Refn made. He said something about this, that the episodes here are designed to be watched in any order. And I think that might be an interesting way to experience the story, believe it or not. If they're all named after tarot cards from the major arcana, so you have to remove some because they skip the Hierophant, the Emperor, Sun, Moon, Stars, and Death. I seem to recall, if my Binding of Isaac, if my understanding of again the major arcana tarot deck from the Binding of Isaac is correct. Oh, they skipped the Chariot.
I thought those were all marshmallows and Lucky Charms, but
they also skipped the Chariot and Strength. So there is theoretically enough for a whole other season of this, believe it or not. So yeah, that's my combination of Binding of Isaac and Stardust Crusaders. I think I remembered all the major tarot cards there. So if you pulled out the ones that don't exist and then just drew them in a random order and then watched them in that order, it might be. I think it would be a very interesting way to experience the story. I don't have a whole lot for this one. Again, we kind of joked about the opening bit where he resigns from the sheriff's office.
They got a nice big bowl of chips there for him.
And he didn't even take one until the guy gave him one, the jerk. I just don't have a whole lot about this one. I think we've talked about the vast majority of what I think we want to talk about. There's the very long sequence where Janie reports her father missing, and again, I don't have a whole lot to go on with that. I already talked about Martin and Leo and their kind of relationship and their bond that's been built. I'm really kind of over by the time this episode gets going. Yuritsa as the High Priestess of Death because plot armor.
Yeah.
It's just not my thing, man. It's not doing anything for me.
There's a character trope that Refn is absolutely fetishizing with her. Like, he decided that there was something about that particular trope that he was just in love with, and he embodied that character with it and that actress, and he was like, all the things for you. Because the men in this are all such broken shitbags. And she is treated like Superman. In every sense of the word. In the sense of, like, Refn directs that actress like she's perfect.
I was going to say, is there a moment in this series where she looks weak at all?
No.
Not at all.
Yeah.
No, she, and I think, and here's the thing.
She is Captain Marvel for the surrealistic.
I was going to go with
French
Rey.
movement.
I was going to go with Rey from the last Star Wars trilogy. She's the most perfectest, with no reason why.
Well, again, that's more Captain Marvel than Rey, I think.
Well,
Rey just has inexplicable powers that come out of nowhere for plot convenience.
I was going to say the Midnight's Edge people would disagree with you, because that's all they ever say about her. All right, Volume 9, The Empress. After Martin's death, Diana has a vision with her eyes clouding over. She performs a ritual with lemon-flavored soda, which reveals Yuritsa to her.
I think that was
her
Lyman,
eyes.
not lemon.
Sure.
Lyman.
Meanwhile, Yuritsa and Jesus roleplay scenes from his childhood, acting out an incestuous relationship between him and his mother. At a meeting with his subordinates, Jesus orders his men to be as brutal and violent as possible, saying he wants to turn America into a theme park of pain. Larson's mother eats his artificial eye while he is sleeping.
What?
Later, he finds
Think about what you just said.
Hang on, I have something I need to talk about with that. But later he finds her dead with his eye by her side. He puts it back into his socket. Larson tells Diana that he needs to take his anger out somewhere. She tells him about a camp of pedophiles, but worries he won't come back if she sends him. While she is waiting for him at a diner, Diana tells her waiter about an older version of the story of Little Red Riding Hood. In this version, the wolf rapes Red Riding Hood instead of eating her, and the next day Red Riding Hood comes back armed and kills the wolf, like you do. Larson returns safely, and the two eat apple pie together. So here's the only thing I want to say about this. I feel like Ed Brubaker wrote a treatment for this show. And I don't know how he ended up with Refn being the director. And I know they're listed as having written this thing together. And I feel like Brubaker brought this to Refn, and Refn was like, can I add a few things? Can I change a few things? Can I kind of Refn this up a bit? And Brubaker was like, sure. And as if imitating Robin Williams, imitating Albert Einstein, he went, what have you done with my formula? What have you done with my screenplay? Because I can't imagine any of this was in there. Like, I think Brubaker had this idea for a cop who starts killing pedophiles and was like, you know who would probably buy into this? That weird Refn guy. And Refn's like, this is too fucking tame. Let's weird it up a bit. And that's how we ended up with these last 2 episodes. It's the only rational explanation for what we got here. Jesse.
Episode 8 leaves us with, like, all sorts of questions. You know, our main character is dead. We have aliens, beings, whatever, showing up. And then Jenna Malone shows up in episode 9 with silver eyes. And I was like, okay, so this is where we're going. I think episode 8, they were like, convention is now thrown out the window. Swift kick in the ass, and there it went. Right out the window. And we've got...
These last 2 episodes are nothing but Refn.
Yeah. I mean, seriously. So, okay.
Wait. This is actually true, I think. Now, I'm looking at the writing credits. Episode 9 is credited to being written by Nicholas Refn, Ed Brubaker, and Hallie Gross, with episode 10 only being Wending and Hallie Gross. Brubaker's story seems to have ended, essentially, with that... with the death of Martin, and then the cartel going, yeah, free reign.
Wow.
That tracks.
So this was, I think, episode 8, near the end of episode 8, and then going into episode 9 and 10 was where Amazon has a 10-second skip forward button. And I will tell you that you will not miss anything if you just hit the 10, and if you'll hit the 10-second fast forward, and then the scene will change after hitting it maybe 3 times. You may, oh, okay, all right, maybe I should pay attention now. These guys are talking. Well, when Jesus and Yaritza are doing the whole role-play milk thing, I sent Mark a video of that whole scene and me hitting the fast-forward button. It lasted, I think, like a minute and a half of her just opening the fridge and pouring a glass of milk and taking it over to him while he had his backpack on. I was like, okay, whatever. Then we get like, not Luke Cage level, but we do have a concert in here where Alfonso gets to sing.
This is so much better than any of the musical numbers from Luke Cage.
Oh, shut up.
Words do not do justice to the majesty of this performance.
Whatever.
And we sit there and watch the whole song.
No. Hail to the Chief, or forgive me, I forget a bunch of the other songs. No, none of those. All of them should be redubbed with this song for the entirety of Luke Cage Season 1.
Nice.
Infinitely better show. Infinitely.
So anyway, we get to watch that whole performance, okay? It's not going to be cut. We're not going to come right in at the end. No, we get to watch the whole performance. We get the roundtable meeting. We'll talk about Cartel TV. I'll leave that to Winfrey. I know he's got a few things he wants to talk about. And then, let's see. Oh, yeah. Vigo takes his eye out, his prosthetic eye, lays it on the table, and his mom picks it up and puts it in her mouth. And I'm, again, writing notes and not comprehending how I'm typing this and watching this actually happen in front of me. Okay, all right, that's weird. But let's talk about Vigo heading to the trailer park. This is the point where I have completely... Okay, no, I lost it a long time ago. Right now I'm just on for the ride, and we got like one more episode left. Let's have fun. Let's watch Vigo. Nothing but him. Stark black background, firing a rifle, and then I don't know how to even describe it. Still images of hillbillies.
Like
One
that.
dude dressed up in a Santa suit. I mean, it's just pops.
Couple of people just trying to, have relations. Somebody running away in his tighty whities. Some guy with a deer head on his crotch.
So I have to put up a picture with the podcast, right? I always put up a picture. There's a part of me that wants to quote unquote subvert expectations and put up the one of the fat hillbilly in the overalls with the guy on the scooter with the deer head in his crotch.
Oh.
If I can find a decent enough size of that picture.
I don't think you are, because people are like, what the hell? And then when they listen to the podcast, they'll understand where we're coming from.
Well, instead of putting up like a poster of the show, I put that up instead. That would be subverting expectations, see?
That's fine.
Sort of.
Anyway, I'm glad Vigo destroyed this place, but I mean, it was in the weirdest fashion. How we just kept getting these flashes of, and then of course we get the guy with the rifle in his hand and the wings drawn on his back and an eagle screeching. And I was just like, okay, so. Anyway, that's kind of all the notes that I have. I wrote down the scary Little Red Riding Hood story that obviously traumatized the poor waitress that was just like, here, just let me have the cherry pie, please. I want to take it to my grandma. Leave me alone. But that's all I have.
I'll listen to your weird story if I can get a tip above 20%.
Please, yeah, and I'll sit down beside you. We'll talk about it.
Robert?
Okay, a couple of things. One, yes, I jokingly, like half jokingly, half sincerely, do enjoy that musical performance. I think I enjoy Alfonso singing along to it more than anything else. The Cartel Roundtable thing. What stuck out to me from there was the pitch for Cartel TV from one of the underlings, because somebody has done this. Like, that's not they didn't sit down and come up with a gimmick for that. I almost guarantee you somebody pitched, maybe to Reffin, because he's weird enough, hey, how about we do a reality show or a reality live stream? That way we can get around a lot of censorship issues. We'll live stream Cartel Life. It'll be great. Look, man, I killed this guy yesterday. 25,000 new followers. So many of them are ready to become subscribers. We can monetize this on a whole other level, and somebody has pitched this to somebody.
Yes,
sincerely.
It had to have happened.
So I got a serious kick out of that.
And I'm expecting Alfonso to do the whole gangster thing and pretend to accept it, and then turn around and pistol whip this guy into oblivion. But no, he actually takes it under advisement, doesn't he? He's like, okay, yeah, it's a good idea.
No, and wait, you got 25,000 new followers for your Twitter account that's Cartel TV. There might be something here.
Alfonso.
All right, and that brings us to our glorious conclusion. Volume 10, The World.
I call this the climax.
Volume 10.
You're so witty.
Wait. Look, I've said that I've made my having watched JoJo's a time or two public at this point. I have to do this once. None of you are going to get this joke, but if I don't do it, I am just the world's biggest coward. Volume 10, The World.
Good.
All right.
Again, you will not get that reference if you haven't watched JoJo's. But to the three people who are the overlap between people who have seen JoJo's and people who listen to our podcasts, I had to do it.
So Diana masturbates while using VR equipment, shaves her legs, calls in sick to work, and dances, and dances, and dances. And I really wished they had gone for the meta reference of having her dance to Dancing with Myself. But she danced to, I can't remember the song now. She prophesizes that civilization.
We're gonna get a new Facebook page out of this. Diana DeYoung dancing to the same woman dancing around her house to a different song each day.
She prophesizes that civilization will soon end and evil will prosper until things reach a breaking point, after which she will declare the dawn of innocence. Yaritza visits a bar where she drinks with a gangster. She asks the girls to play the song about the High Priestess of Death that's been going around. When asked why she requested the song, Yaritza replies by killing all the men, because of course. in the bar except one.
In fairness, there are only evil men in the bar.
As he begs for mercy, she declares that she will rid the world of evil and kills him. Let me just say that my favorite part of this show was obviously Jenna Malone dancing nose to the wall and shimmying. That's fucking fantastic. I want to take this opportunity also, because we mentioned it before about the synthesizer music in the show and everything. There's actually a soundtrack to this. So, according to the wiki, Cliff Martinez composed the score for the series, his fourth collaboration with Nicholas Winding Refn. Like previous works of Refn, the series also features a variety of electronic music and punk rock by bands like Goldfrapp, The Leather Nun, Jesse's favorite band, and Frankie Miller and Jimmy Angel. The soundtrack featuring the score as well as the pre-existing pop music was featured in the show release on June 14th, 2019, and you can find, for your listening pleasure, yes.
Oh my gosh.
The Too Old to Die Young original series soundtrack on where? AmazonMusic.com. That's right. If you go to getamazonmusic.com/W2M network right now, you can listen to all this great music that we've been talking about from the show. And really, why wouldn't you? And that is all I have to say about
that. So, speaking of subverting expectations, all right, when you experience episodes 1 through 9, like I did, okay, and you pull up episode 10 and you see that it's 30 minutes long, and it's actually 28, I think, if I remember correctly. It's either 28 or 26, because the credits hit well before that 30-minute mark. I didn't know what to think. I was like, there's no possible way that he is going to be able to tell me anything in 30 minutes. How are we supposed to wrap this series up in 30 minutes? So here's your countdown, ladies and gentlemen. 10 minutes of it is Diana doing a VR jerk-off session, and then we have...
I was not joking when I said this is apportioned evenly in 10-minute segments.
And then, like we said, we got her dancing to some music. We get a monologue. 8 minutes left of the show. 8 minutes left in the show, and Yuritsa's shown up at a bar, and with 6 minutes left, our patrons of the bar are wondering what's up, and she kills all of them, which there is nothing unexpected that happens with Yuritsa's character here. She shows up, you know exactly what's going to happen. She's going to walk out. Well, I should say your expectation is that. Maybe if you were really thinking, you were like, oh, she's not walking out of this alive. We know Refn. Look what he did to us for 9 episodes. She's dead.
You don't understand. I think in the entirety of this movie, I can't say this for certain. Movie again, God. It's a 13-hour movie. It really is.
It is.
That's a more accurate description of this than 13 episodes of television. I think there are only like 3 women that are killed in the entire freaking thing, because poor Janie gets shot in the face.
The pornographer woman.
Yep.
Yeah, and then there's the abusive foster parent who gets stabbed by the world's most flatly aggressive, like non-emotionally aggressive block of wood. Refn, for some reason, this particular iteration of his film career, decided that no, I'm not for violence against women. They will not die on my watch. Yuritsa has plot armor to the nth degree.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like he definitely has a commentary about men. Men are gross, but women are perfect, and that seems to be like one of the things he's saying.
And all women are your mother.
Gross.
Isn't it just?
And that's kind of it with this show, right? It's like men are gross, women are perfect, and your mom, and that's it. And Los Angeles is beautiful at night.
It's really not.
Ta-da!
That's the least believable thing about this entire show is that this guy finds beauty in the Los Angeles nightscape.
All right, we got to close up here. We have been at this for 2.5 hours. This might be the longest podcast I've done in ages. So let's go.
Considering this show, it only seems appropriate.
Indeed. So Jesse, give me your final thoughts.
Well, all right. Really, to sum this up, it can only be stated like this.
Fat boys, you know without my love. In the engineer room right about this time. All right, I'm done.
Thank you.
The
Thank you.
fat
Winfrey,
boys.
the floor's yours.
The fat boys are back, and you know they can never be whacked. The fat boys are back. Do you remember the fat boys? All right, now go.
Okay. I have a couple of things about this that I think need to be said. The filming of this thing, I think, is one of the things that I mentioned. I wanted to touch on. Principal photography began on November 27th, 2017. Filming for the first episode ended on January 17th, 2018. Final principal photography for the series did not end until August 11th, 2018. They spent almost an entire year shooting this, and I'm shocked they did it that quickly. When you think about the amount of time that goes into all of these shots and then all the angles you have to hit together, I almost feel bad for the actors because you have to imagine they did like your opening bit. And then at the end of which Refn went, cut, print it, that was great, reset, we're going to do it from this side.
Once again, with new feeling.
And they did it again, and again, and again, and again, and again. If we can all remember the great bit from The Simpsons, we did the Jiminy Jilliker scene. It took us 27 takes, but we did it. It's done. Yes, but now we have to do it again for a different angle, and again, and again, and again, and again, and maybe again. I don't know how these poor actors did it.
You know, I worked in Hollywood for a little bit of time, a very brief period of my life. I was this Hollywood extra, and I remember shooting Stuart Little, being on the set for Stuart Little. Like, I shot it. Let me try again. I was on set as an extra for Stuart Little, and I remember a scene that we shot with Gina Davis on the bridge. This is one fucking shot we did. One scene. And it's the boat, I don't know if you've ever seen Stuart Little, but it's the boat race scene. And until you really know...
You're in the credits for that?
No. I'm a Hollywood extra.
They don't give you. Did you actually make this? Did you make the scene? Are you on? Are you in the movie?
Maybe. I know. I think you can see me at the bottom of the frame of Man on the Moon, but I'm pretty sure I'm
Nice.
I'm nowhere near visible. My cousin might be. She was in there too. My cousin might be for Stuart Little. You can definitely see me in an episode of not Dharma and Greg, but the other one with man and a girl, gay guy, redheaded chick.
Will and Grace.
Will and Grace, yeah. I'm on an episode of Will and Grace. I am right there on camera.
Nice.
Yeah. So anyway, point being, like, that's the thing that I learned my first year living in Los Angeles, being, a Hollywood extra, was what it takes to compose a shot, and how, like, that's absolutely right. Like, they shoot it. If they've got the take they want, they go great, and then they have to shoot it again with a different camera from a different angle, and you have, and it's a lot of the same beats and performances multiple times, and they're all cuts they're going to use, but it's cuts so that they can, edit different cuts to edit together from different angles. And I was like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. The repetition will kill me. Yeah. I can't. I'm just not built that way. Like some people, like it's one of the things
now you just make the same joke week after week.
Well, there's a difference between being an actor and having to do the same scenes and being and being a hack comedian. I absolutely own being a hack.
Not these days. There isn't.
Well,
have you seen Hollywood comedies lately?
Fair enough. All right, so wrap up your point.
So yeah, there's that. I almost feel bad for the actors. But they all got paid, so hey, sucks to be them sometimes, I guess. You choose your projects.
Yeah.
We've joked a lot about this, and I think it is kind of the old the tears of a clown kind of thing. We're how do I say this? This is an ugly story. Again, levity aside, I think that's one of the things that I struggle with. I have experienced, whatever the medium you want to be. I've experienced ugly stories in the past, and I don't mean to say that means it shouldn't exist. Let me be very, very clear about that. And it's not about the violence. There are some beautiful stories that have a lot of violence. Like some horror movies actually fall into that category. This is, on every possible level, an ugly, ugly story. It's one of the things it's one of the reasons I think I couldn't connect with it. Because it is so again, ugly is kind of the only word I have. It's repulsive. And that does, again, it's kind of trying to be, right? This is not me saying this is something, amateurish. This is, I am not repelled by this because it sucks. I'm repelled by this because it wants to be repellent. And
Right.
That's commendable on some levels, I suppose. But everything about this story, and it's not just that there's no hero, in which I know some people have kind of griped about. I'm fine with stories that don't have heroes. You reference The Wire all the time. There's no heroes in The Wire.
No. Not a single one.
There's not even anybody. There's not even really anyone you root for in The Wire. There's just people you like more than others.
Well, no, there are some people who are imperfect but genuinely doing good things.
Okay, you root
Bunk.
for Bubbles. You root for Bubbles to go into recovery. That's
Well, I
kind
was
of
going to
about
say,
it.
Bunk's not a bad cop. He does, he cheats on his wife and he drinks too much, but generally speaking, he's a competent cop solving murders, and he's a decent fella, and he seems to treat his children well. He's probably the most likable character.
He is freaking Superman as far as that show goes.
I was like, he's probably the most likable character on, in the show in terms of characters doing something good. I think the only other one is I can't remember her character's name, but the one the black lesbian that partners up with McNulty for a while. Where again, I think she's genuinely like a good person with human faults that we all have to one degree or another. But your point is well taken that, like, okay, The Shield would actually be a better example.
Sure.
Everybody on that show is either broken and or a scumbag or, like you root for Mackie because he's the star and you want to see him kick ass, but he's a horrid human being.
Yeah, I mean, again, the closest you get in The Shield would be why am I blanking on the character's name? The detective with lupus.
Oh, yeah, who ends up being the captain for a bit.
Yeah. Like, she's a genuine... Like, even she, of course, has her personal foibles and foils that are revealed as the show goes on. But, yeah, they're all broken. Some of them are just vile people. Some of them are just dickheads. Looking at you, Dutch. You just...
I'm sorry. That show has one of the funniest, unintentionally, funniest line deliveries I've ever heard in a network show or cable show. Jesse, have you ever watched The Shield?
It's been a while. I know of it, but it's been a while since I've seen it.
So when Acevedo is explaining to his wife that he had to blow a guy not to get killed, and his wife, with revulsion, goes, "You sucked." It's perfect, but it's also unintentionally hilarious.
Oh.
Anyway.
Yeah. Genuinely tragic moment for that character because Acevedo has resisted telling her because you'll react with horror and revulsion, and she spends most of that season going, quit keeping secrets from me. I'm a big girl. I can handle it. He tells her, and she runs off in horror.
She's horrified and revolted.
Yes. But again, kind of back to the point about the show. Again, it's not just that there's no heroes. It's more that the only kind of commentary you get out of it is a deeply, profoundly like fatalistic nihilism.
Yeah.
That nothing matters. That the only thing we can hope to the best people in this show are vile murderers who just happen to do it in the furtherance of a loose moral code about protecting innocence that we can all kind of somehow rationalize to ourselves as viewers. I want to be careful how I say this, because I don't want this to come across as an indictment on anyone else or me taking shots at Mark or something like that. I do kind of regret watching this.
Okay.
And again, I'm not sure how much of that is a deliberate attempt by the filmmaker to have created this, or how much of that is just me going for some reason. And I am, Mark, you know me. In fact, we talked about Irreversible, which I had no problem sitting through. I don't know what combination of things it was in this, whether it was some combination of boredom and revulsion that made me just kind of want to go, all right, enough, I'm done. But I really struggled to get through this. And it's not that it's not well made. Some parts of it are, and parts of it are very, very compelling and very, very affecting. And I want to make that abundantly clear. But taken as a whole investment of 13 hours... man, not something I would choose to do again. And again, something that if I could send an inkling back to my past self, I'd just say no. When you say I need your thoughts on this, like, yeah, here's my thought, and just send you a picture of some like one of those famous pictures of an elephant pooping on someone. Here's my thoughts on this.
50 words or less. I'm not sorry I watched this. I'm kind of sorry I made Jesse watch it, because I honestly... We joke about like me forcing quote unquote, forcing you to watch things that you don't necessarily want to watch for purpose of podcasts.
You just unfairly leverage your position of emotional power over me. That's how you force me.
Either way, we agreed to do a podcast together, with a certain structure to it, and there are things that fall into that structure that you may or may not actually want to watch, but we've agreed that this is what we're going to do, come hell or high water, and so we do it.
At this point, a portion of my grousing is just to keep the gimmick going.
Sure. But I genuinely feel bad I made Jesse watch this, because this is not your thing. And it's like, I honestly was like...
You had no idea what you were getting into.
No, I really didn't.
You had no clue. And honestly, I had the most fun sitting here going, what the hell is going on? And then sharing it with all you guys so you guys could try to make sense of it, or just join in with me and be as dumbfounded and awestruck as some of the shit that happened on here.
But we started
the Refn fans are going to drag us.
Oh yeah,
from the
I know, dude. That's it's inevitable that this show is so divisive that, and Refn is a divisive filmmaker. There are a lot of praises. Like I said, love the cinematography. I love the way the show looks. I love the score. But let's go. Let's pick up the pace a little bit. That is the one thing that I couldn't. I like Drive. That's the one the one movie that I watched that I really enjoyed. That was on his list that he directed. I like that movie. My wife hated it, and whoa boy, let me tell you, there was a millisecond that I considered watching this with my wife, and thank goodness.
Dude, your wife would have watched that 3-minute opening where we just kind of slowly pan around those two standing before they even start talking, and would have just slugged you in the shoulder and walked out.
I'm expecting Mindy to be like, someone better throw a fucking pie soon.
I'm taking the kids to stay with my sister for a week.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Let
don't
me-
want to
all
be
right.
in this house when this happens.
So that we can wrap this up, let me say this. I don't regret watching this. One, this has been, for two reasons. One, I mentioned this to my wife tonight. I said, I don't quite understand the issues I run up against with the other people that I podcast with on this network in terms of reviewing things that are bad. Because number one, I think bad things tend to generate great conversation.
Sure.
I think we've discussed a lot of bad on through various podcasts over the last couple of years of Rattlenger Broadcasting Network, and great podcasts were produced because of it. And so I don't. So when I pitch something and the reaction I get is that's bad, I don't want to talk about it. My first private reaction is, why the fuck not? Why not talk about this and say how bad it is and why it's bad and how it could have been better? Because sitting for an hour singing the praises of, I don't know, let me throw something out there. The Mandalorian. Especially season 1. Where it's like, yeah, I get that everyone likes a dog and his puppy. So the fuck what? I would rather talk about something that really generates conversation about film and life and the nature of man than just panting for an hour how much I like this thing that's really entertaining. One is boring, one is interesting. And I don't get to do a lot of interesting anymore. By choice. By choice. I'm doing Tom and Jerry next week. I know what I'm doing.
Dude, after this, we might actually be looking forward to Tom and Jerry.
Yeah, really. But that's my point. Like, I go headlong into Tom and Jerry and Willy's Wonderland, and all.
Hang on. Willy's Wonderland actually prompted some decent discussion about, again, filmmaking tricks and and some of the creative process there.
Okay, also not a deep movie.
True.
So, I get it. There's fun to be had in talking about all that stuff, but I think every once in a while I need an Only God Forgives or The Watchmen or something that makes me think. And even if it's bad, it's still good. You know what I mean by that? Even if if there are craft problems with it.
What you are doing, I think, when you look at film in that respect, you're not looking at the movie and kind of taking it on its own merits. When again, spoiler about some of the people Mark's talking about when he says, "Hey, let's talk about X." I'm usually the one who goes, "No, X sucks." I am not exclusively. I'm not the only person who does that, but it is frequently me. You'll also note that I'm frequently the one roped into these things.
Yeah, you get a
Again,
pass.
Mark leverages his emotional superiority over me. That's fine. I think when you say that, hey, let's talk again, when something like that, you're not looking at the movie and taking the movie on its own. You're actually looking at it and going, huh, so what's after this? What will this generate for me in terms of talking on a podcast about it?
Right.
Which is fine. Understand that when I say I think something sucks, that's at face value, that's kind of what it is. So do you want to talk about this movie? Well, this movie sucks, and that's more a knee-jerk reaction, especially when you bring up something that sucks.
So
as opposed to me saying I think the discussion about it will suck.
So yeah, no, and I get that. Here's my final point. Only God Forgives. We've discussed at length now, almost 3 hours talking about this. The good, the bad, and the.
This is Too Old to Die Young. Only God Forgives is the movie starring Ryan Gosling.
I'm sorry.
Would you like 13 hours of Only God Forgives?
I'm looking at my calendar. I fucked up. Sorry.
I mean, if you want it, I'm sure you could ask Reffin. He can probably figure out an uncut version.
Take 2. We spent almost 3 hours talking about Too Old to Die Young, the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's fine. Oh gosh. And I think it was worth doing, even if the sort of visceral experience of watching this thing wasn't always pleasant for one reason or another. I'm happy we did it, and Oh yeah, I was saying I need this. I need to sometimes sit and watch something good, bad, or indifferent that's at least going to make me think. That isn't just entertaining. I know there are some, like my wife is a really good example of somebody who's like, TV's just for entertainment. I don't need to be fucking made to think. And there are certain things that do make her react emotionally one way or the other. But she's not in this for the art. I am.
No, Mark, you don't get to say that. You spent 3 hours trying to convince me that Age of Extinction wasn't a steaming pile of flaming crap.
Well, there's that too. I get what I'm saying is like
that podcast was like a great piece of performance art that neither of us knew was performance art at the time.
To put a final point on this, I talked at the beginning of the podcast, and around this back to the beginning, that, like I said, I used to be like really into film, and I used to be really into studying film. I don't get to do that anymore by choice. I got to do it with this accidentally. I really just fucking stumbled into it, and I'm glad I did. So, with that said, we're done. I'm done. I want to go to bed. Tomorrow, we're doing we're continuing our transition from Brubaker to Refn. And Refn exclusively in this case. We're going to be doing an on trial for Only God Forgives. So that'll be me and Sean. That should be an interesting podcast as well. And from the ridiculous to the sublime, or the sublime to the ridiculous, however you like it, we'll also be reviewing the Elimination Chamber from this past Sunday because it was awesome. I came to play.
Please don't. Look, there's only one thing I hope comes out of that. And they teased it on this week's Raw. I want Miz to hold that belt for exactly 5 more days and then get murdered by Bobby Lashley in 2 minutes. Because that's what they've set up.
Yeah, I'm hoping we get Bobby Lashley versus Brock Lesnar, so I have at least one reason to watch WrestleMania. Besides him covering it.
Look, man, Edge and Roman is going to be great. Like, hang on, hear me out. The combination of talkers that is Paul Heyman, Roman Reigns, and Edge, they're going to put on some of the most compelling narrative that that WWE is capable of producing right now.
Right, and then the bell's going to ring. Edge is going to injure himself, and then he'll be off TV for the next 10 years.
Oh, okay, sure. The man's made out of tissue paper. What do you? Well, look, that or the pandemic, that or Roman gets the vaccine and reacts badly to it and is off TV for another 6 months. Take it back.
If you've enjoyed Robert and I talking the art of film, we'll be back Thursday at noon to talk I Care a Lot from Netflix, starring Rosamund Pike, who was nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Comedy or Musical. You know what? Someone shamed me into making mention of these things, so now I can't stop doing it.
Okay, look, I'm not saying you don't have to do it. I'm saying it's the Golden Globes. No one cares.
I'm sure it'll get nominated for an Oscar, too.
Probably not. Look, we're watching that because Peter Dinklage.
Fair enough. And then Pat Mullen and I will be doing our next chapter in the history of heavyweight boxing championships. We'll be talking about the great Lennox Lewis, the last man to unify the fractured heavyweight title in the last 20 years or so. You can check out me and Chris Sheehan talking Scene of the Crime. Robert Winfrey and Sean Comer reviewed Space Sweepers. Last week, myself and Ronnie Adam discussed both the book and the show Stumptown, the aforementioned Willy's Wonderland, NXT TakeOver Vengeance Day, and Jesse and I reviewed Serenia, Riddles, Ruins, and Revelations. Alexis Hannah and I reviewed Judas and the Black Messiah. It wasn't nearly as tone-deaf as you might think 2 white people talking about that movie would be. All right, speaking of white people, Jesse, go.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you can check out our latest episode of Unspoken Issues, 25th episode hit there back on February 17th, where Chris Armstrong and I discussed Jim Lee taking over Savage Dragon for an issue. And it was a lot of fun. There was definitely a little bit of controversy as to whether Jim Lee actually did the issue or not. But check that short episode out. It was only about 40 minutes long. And also source material, the syndicated source material, episode 7, dropped this past Saturday, where I did a solo podcast and talked about Batman Year 2, real early Todd McFarlane art on, and some great stuff from some storytellers in there. I think it was last name was Barr. Oh, don't hold me to that. I can't remember. But anyway, Batman Year 2. You can check it out. Batman is shooting people with the weapon that killed his parents in that.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So, hey, it was 1980 something, I think. 87, 88, something around there. Anyway, check that out. That's really all I got to plug, sir.
All right, Winfrey, 50 words or less. Go.
Less.
he opts for less.
You can find me most Sundays hosting the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. If you happen to be a fan of the sport of mixed martial arts, you can find me there. I talk about stuff. Last week we talked about UFC on ESPN Plus 43, previewed UFC on ESPN Plus 44. This coming week we'll review that event and preview UFC, the big pay-per-view, UFC 259. Our triple title fight. Three title fights. Two of them really good. One of them, it's women's featherweight. What do you want? Israel Adesanya trying to become a double champ. Should be a really, really good really stacked pay-per-view on pay-per-view on paper. So we'll be previewing that. I cover most UFC events for 411 Mania over in the MMA zone of that particular website. So if you're interested, please feel free to check out my stuff over there. Fridays in the wrestling zone of 411 Mania, I cover WWE SmackDown, and I'm just driving that traffic into the frickin' ground. I am the man. I am the thief of joy.
Speaking of which, he also joined myself, David Wright, and my daughter, my 10-year-old daughter. She pitched a show she was very passionate about, Demon Slayer, all 26 odd episodes on Netflix. She said, we have to watch this together, then we have to talk about it. And so we did. And Robert Winfrey and David Wright were there as well.
Yeah, look, I didn't make her cry, to the best of my knowledge, so we're calling that a win. I was part of that. Mark already mentioned a few of the Damn You Hollywoods. There's the one coming up for Tom and Jerry, which should be a lot of fun. I don't think... okay, so we have Tom and Jerry, and then coming up shortly, we will have I Care a Lot, which... we'll have a nothing discussion. Watch us have a nothing discussion about that, and I have to hang my head in shame for suggesting things.
All right. Folks, thank you for joining what's possibly the longest podcast I've been on in ages. We are over 3 hours at this point. I'm fucking...
Woo! Take that, reffin'.
So hang on. We've reached the appropriate amount of time between 3 lines of dialogue in the opening episode.
Be well, be safe, and behave.